So, Berto, what do you know about John Lennon's psychology?
Of his psychology?
Yeah.
Well, I know he had a few parental issues like all of us do. And I know he probably had a few chips on his shoulder from, challenges and struggles when he was a kid. And he certainly brought those to bear as an adult. He also had to have, because, when they became big and famous, he was like in his early 20s. So he's still growing up. And that changed his whole perspective on so many things. And so that must have had a lot of an impact on the way he behaved towards the world, towards the press, towards his bandmates. And then, of course, when he found Yoko, he probably... And when he went to the East, to India, that had a huge effect on him too, just like on all of them, really. But overall, I think the guy was going through this big, big journey that he's probably just coming out of by the time he got killed. Like, he was probably on the way to a normalized, kind of more mature plane of looking at the world and himself, and then he got shot.
Yeah, I would say that's all true. So we're going to do a deep dive on John Lennon's psychology. I have a lot of notes, and so this might take a while. So strap in, people.
Strap on in.
I'm going to state right up front what I think what I'm going to conceptualize his personality, and then I'm going to justify it as we go.
Okay.
Now, of course, I can't diagnose him because I don't know him. I've never assessed him. So in line with my policy about not diagnosing from afar, not breaking the Goldwater rule, I'm not going to diagnose him. But I will say that from what I can tell and what from a lot of people can tell, what we can gather from resources, and there are many because he was pretty honest in interviews. Yeah. And obviously, there's been a lot of time for the truth to come out from family members and stuff. I think that he presents a good example of someone with borderline personality. I'm not going to say he suffered from the disorder, and I will say though that he was on the spectrum, and I think he provides a good case study of that. I can't say for sure because I haven't known him or assessed him, but we can go over what we can glean from the evidence to point in that direction.
Do you know, not only do I agree with that, but there are things he did that remind me of people in my life that probably have a similar situation going on in there.
Well, when we're gonna go through his life from 0 to 40 step by step, and when it comes up, let us know. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist, a professor, and a avid lover of the Beatles and John Lennon. Who are you, Berto?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I teach how to set up humidifiers.
So you and I are super fans of the Beatles.
Definitely.
But I feel like we need to provide evidence to the internet to prove our credentials. What are some of your credentials, Berto?
Well, I mean, on the one hand, I have been so obsessed over the years with their recording methods and all the stories of their recordings. So I have probably 10 different books related to how they recorded each song, what instruments they used, how they mic'd it, as well as the thinking, what the lyrics meant, what all these kind of things. And I've been reading those since 1993.
Okay. Right. So for me, similar, I never went down that road because I don't know why. I just never thought about gear in that way. I think you're more of especially in the past, you were more of a gear person.
Definitely gearhead, yeah.
For me, they're my favorite band. I think they are the best band that ever lived or ever will live for all time, forever. I don't think you could ever have a better band than the Beatles. More influential, more culturally influential, more charming. I mean, late at night, I'll just watch YouTube videos of them just hanging out on a bus.
Yeah.
It's just they're just so goddamn charming.
Yeah.
They released records from late 1962 to 1969. That's like 7 or 8 years.
Yep.
And that they were and still are the best-selling band in history.
And it's crazy. Like when you look at the schedule of their releases,
they were together for less amount of time than we've been doing this podcast.
Yes. And yet And yet, like album after album with like these powerhouse hits and like crazy, and not just hits, like changing what music was like.
Right. Groundbreaking, experimental. Everyone copied them and still do. Best-selling band in history. They've sold, guess how many units worldwide they sold of all time?
Of their CDs?
Oh, everything. Records, tapes, everything.
Okay, so, 50 million.
1 billion.
A billion units.
More than 1 billion units.
Oh my God.
That's insane. Because when you sell like 500,000, that's a gold record.
Yeah.
So
platinum's 1 million.
Right. So they have 1,000 platinum records. They have 2,000 gold records.
That's crazy.
They have the most #1 albums of all time, most #1 hits of all time. In high school, every inch of my bedroom wall was covered with Beatles stuff. I had posters, I had records, I had postcards, I had stickers, I had memorabilia.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything, and no one else was on the wall. There weren't any other bands.
Wow.
It was just the Beatles, just a shrine to the Beatles. I could go on and on, but just another couple data bullet points here. My favorite song of all time is Yesterday. When Paul sings it, and I've seen him live sing it more than once, I always cry. Even when I see tribute bands like Rain or the other tribute Beatles bands, whenever they always play Yesterday, and I always cry during that.
It's a song that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And just so perfect.
And when I was in London, I made a beeline for the home that he wrote this song in. It was at Asher, her home. You and I have performed a Beatles album from beginning to end live. You and I learned the harmonies and every song, Rubber Soul, from beginning to end. That takes dedication.
Yeah.
Whenever someone asks me what famous person I would like to hang out with, I always say Paul McCartney.
Of course.
or John Lennon. But it's usually Paul McCartney, but it's often John Lennon as well.
I should point out, so for me, because you had Beatles in your life probably from the moment you were born, because probably your brothers had, your parents had,
That's right. Yeah. My brother had 45s with like Yellow Submarine and all that kind of stuff.
So my journey was a little different because my dad was not into the Beatles. And so the only quote unquote Beatles stuff I knew coming up was whatever they would play on the radio still,
In Colombia?
In Colombia. Until I remember distinctly one day I went to visit an older participant in my taekwondo class. And I was probably 11 at the time, and he was 17 or 18. And me and my dad went over because he was like my dad's, there was some familiar relation. And we went over, and the guy had every Beatles record and all these posters. Probably like your room, like it could have been you. And I just like, whoa. And then he starts playing songs, and I'm like, oh, I know that one. I've never heard this one. And it's just like this magical world opened up to me. And then my cousin, Diego, who was this amazing keyboardist, he started teaching me Let It Be on the piano and on the organ. And then that was it for me. And then he also had the blue and the red. Those. So I would listen to those. And we took this trip, this car trip that was an 8-hour road trip. And we had a tape in the car, listening to it the whole way over and over and over. Yeah. It's all Beatles songs. Yeah. So that's when I really started deep diving.
Yeah, for me, I grew up with the Beatles always on the radio, and my family would have records, I remember, and my friends would have records, and loved the Beatles a lot. But I didn't really, when you're a kid, you're not like an avid fan of anything usually. But when I became like 12 years old, I got the cassette that read, I think I got it from Safeway. I was in the line and I was like, oh, I want that Beatles album. And it's their best of songs from their early years. Yeah. And I brought that home and I listened to that album over and over and over again. And I would sit on my bed with my wooden tennis racket, and I would pretend that I was, in the Beatles, and I'd sing along.
You probably had the same effect where even to this day, a lot of times when a song plays that's in one of those tapes, you still imagine the one that comes next in that tape.
I don't actually, because pretty quickly after that, I started acquiring all the albums. And so to me, And so, well, the problem with me actually is that the next song is often the American version of the albums, you know what I mean? Which isn't the real, like some songs I associate with certain albums that actually aren't on that album.
Sure.
If you're a Beatles fan, you understand what I'm saying. Anyway, so let's get into John Lennon's life. Born October 9, 1940 in Liverpool, England. So his family said, I think particularly his mom, Julia, said that he was born during a German air raid from World War II.
That's stressful.
Right. But when they actually look at the historical record, that's not possible.
Oh, okay.
So right away, you see that his mom and his family have kind of an issue with the truth.
Sure.
Kind of an issue with narcissism or making things a little bit...
Aggrandizing things.
Yeah. He was named John Winston after Winston Churchill.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Which makes sense because at the time, 1940, Winston Churchill was the savior of...
He's the man.
Of Britain. His father, what do you know about his father? Do you know anything about him?
No.
Yeah, I didn't. So before doing this deep dive, I didn't know anything about his dad. Of course, I knew about Julia.
I mean, the other thing is like, I read probably like, I don't know, 3 or 4 big biographies, but this was in 93 and 94. So I probably forgot almost everything.
Right. So his father's name was Alf, and he looks exactly like John Lennon. And his father, so let's get into his father's life. So his father's father, so his father's name is Alf. So Alf's father died when Alf was very young. So Alf spent many years in an orphanage. I don't know where his mom was, but Alf spent many years in an orphanage, which is a massive attachment injury.
Yeah.
So if you are raised in such an environment, you tend to later in life have a hard time attaching to other people.
Yeah.
And have a hard time being there for your children.
Right.
So yeah, it's a similar problem in the African American
Which can then perpetuate itself.
Right. It's a similar problem in the African American community during the slave times and after, depending on certain social constructs and institutions that were happening, was that you would physically separate children from the parents, as slaves. And so those kids grow up with a massive attachment injury.
Yep.
Then when slavery was made illegal, you now have all these people with massive attachment injuries.
Yep.
And they start having kids, and they have a harder time connecting to their kids because when they were 3, they were, basically just thrown around to different people. And you just rinse and repeat that over the years, and you live in a racist society and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And stress also can lead to people having a harder time with their parenting. And you get situations today where in the African-American group of people, there's a much higher rate of parents not sticking around for their kids.
Yep.
And so...
and then it's been exacerbated since the 70s and 80s with the mass incarceration of black males.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And he's right. So if your dad was falsely imprisoned or unfairly imprisoned, you grow up feeling like, well, dads don't stick around. I'm not worth sticking around for.
Right.
I have to become kind of walled off from my attachment needs.
Yeah.
Then when I grow up and I have kids, it's harder to connect because you're just like, you just don't have the neurons literally to connect with other human beings in that way. Of course, there are many black people who aren't this way, but it is a phenomenon of attachment that I think is quite obvious to me. And with Alf, his dad, so John Lennon's grandfather died when Alf was young, and so this made Alf having some issues with attachment. Alf sang and played the banjo. And he he was sort of like a semi-professional.
Oh,
Alf,
wow.
John Lennon's father. He specialized in impersonating Louis Armstrong and Al Jolson.
What?
Which sort of creeps me out because it rings of blackface, because this would have been like in the 20s when he would have done this, or the 30s. Alf ran away from the orphanage as a child to join a traveling music show, and he was caught and severely punished.
What?
Alf's personality was happy-go-lucky, couldn't resist having a good time. He was sort of a class clown. He never held a job for very long, and he borrowed money from other people. He eventually became a merchant seaman, I think because it sort of lent itself to his lifestyle of not having sort of a steady job. And he was gone most of the time. And World War II required a lot of merchant seamen to be working a lot because there was a lot of jobs to be doing. And he actually tried to get a job in Liverpool as a singer and entertainer, but he didn't get the job. So he ended up leaving John and Julia. So that was massive abandonment for John. So John was very open about the fact that he was very hurt and angry at his father for never being there.
Yeah.
What do you know about his mother?
Julia. I mean, he loved his mom, but it sounds like she was a little chaotic or something, like maybe not dependable in a sense.
Have you seen Nowhere Boy?
No.
You got to see it.
Is that about...
You have a problem with watching Beatles movies. That's how I'm a better fan than you are. Like, you haven't seen Across the Universe.
You're getting it backwards. I'm such a fan that no one will get it right.
You haven't seen Two of Us. You haven't seen Nowhere Boy.
But Across the Universe isn't about the Beatles, right?
Have you seen Backbeat?
Of course. Backbeat's the one movie I watched. But wait, Across the Universe is not...
It's a musical. And it's not about the Beatles, but it has music from the Beatles. But Nowhere Boy is about John when he's in his teen years, and Julia is a big part of that movie. And I think that given the source material, they did pretty well with it. Yeah. So Julia Stanley, her personality was that she really liked to party, which was similar to Alf. So John Lennon's parents both liked to drink a lot and go out a lot, and were both promiscuous. And she didn't like being proper, and she loved black music from America. She loved Elvis.
That makes sense.
And again, quite what they quote unquote promiscuous, meaning that she liked to party and meet men and have sex and drink and everything like that.
Promiscuous at the time.
Yeah.
Well, probably like
the reason why I say quote unquote promiscuous is because promiscuous is a judgmental term.
Yeah.
And it's like, why do we have to judge people who like to have sex with randos? Like, there's something wrong with that. Anyway, John's early childhood, what do you know about it? So, before he's 4 years old.
Before he's 4?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think I know or remember much.
So, father gone most of the time, which we already said. But, so looking into his life, I learned so much in this deep dive. It's like so interesting. Because I've watched so many documentaries.
Yeah.
Ron Howard made a documentary a couple years ago that you actually gave me the vinyl for.
Yeah, but I've rarely seen movies or documentaries where it's about their childhood.
Well, and I think it's because the main documentaries, like the anthology one, was that what it was called? Anthology? It was like 10 VHS tapes.
Right. Yeah. I have that.
They are produced by the Beatles themselves.
Yeah.
So they don't want the nasty side to come out, right?
Right.
And so...
Well, but I mean, but I remember a few stories like, him in his prep school and things like that. But a lot of it is like as he's getting a little older and then...
Well, we're going to get into stuff where I'm guessing you don't know and you're going to be like, what?
Yeah.
And it's like... It's all right there. Yeah. It's all reported on. John Lennon even talked about it. And it's like, how come as a massive Beatle fan, this has never been emphasized to me?
Right.
Or maybe I was in denial of it because I want to be a fan.
Yeah.
There's a lot of darkness to the story, is my point, to the John Lennon story. So father was gone most of the time when he was an infant and a preschool age person. He often saw his mom, Julia, coming home drunk with a new lover.
Yeah.
So that's something that they don't portray. Yeah. They're like, Julia was a free spirit. They'll say in the documentary.
Sure.
They won't say she was potentially an alcoholic who would have sex with random men and bring all these men into their home.
Right.
Okay? This is while she's married, by the way. He's
just not around.
He's just not around.
Yeah.
In the night, John would wake up in the middle of the night and be alone and would be terrified. So imagine you're 2 years old. You wake up in the middle of the night. You're all alone, and he would scream and scream and scream.
Oh.
And the neighbors would hear him and come over.
Oh. Wait, and she was gone.
Yeah.
She would leave him alone?
Yeah.
What?
See, that's not talked about.
Never. She would just leave him alone at 2.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So this is the beginning of borderline. So when you're abandoned and when you're mistreated in this way, this is the building blocks of a scenario where, as a child, you have to develop a style of coping with that.
Yeah.
And one of the styles of coping is the borderline style, which is to be extremely sensitive to anything approaching abandonment to make sure that people stay with you.
Wow.
Julia got pregnant with another man during this time, and her parents forced her into a maternity home and forced her to put up the child for adoption. During this time, John was given to her father's brother while Julia was in the maternity home. And so this is another massive attachment injury. So when he's young, he's basically completely separated from his dad and his mom. His dad, he probably never had an attachment to, but his mom, arguably, he did. And, while the mom was in the maternity home, John had to go to his uncle. Wow. So imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine you're 2-3 years old and you don't know where your dad is, you don't know where your mom is, and you're living with a random uncle.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to some of this because, I didn't know where my mom was. And I had to live, not with a random uncle, I had to live with my grandparents and my aunt for a year at 3, with my dad in Massachusetts and New York.
Oh, so this happened to you.
Some of it did. I mean, not
right. So
not me being left alone all night.
So to demonstrate the coping style that I was saying earlier, you did not develop a borderline personality style. You were faced with a very similar situation as John Lennon. What you developed was a narcissistic style.
Yeah.
One in which you would say, well, I guess I don't really need people that much.
Right.
I'll just sort of, I'm okay on my own.
Right.
I'm very self-efficient. I can handle things on my own.
Right. You
also developed a sense of a grandiose self, of like, I'm special. I'm the best. Look at me.
Right. And everyone would tell me that.
Right.
Because they,
Well, there's a system, right? So that might have pushed you over the edge into narcissism, and that gave you the direction to go in, because it made you feel good to sort of play into that. But then as you play into that, you become more of a showman, and your family starts to reward you for that.
Right.
And you start getting love and attention from that. Maybe even your mom starts paying a little bit more attention to you because of that. I don't know. And so then you develop a narcissistic style.
Right.
But John didn't. And John actually did. So I should say, we'll eventually get to this. He developed a narcissistic style as well, but he was more borderline. But he was and I consider borderline and narcissism to be basically on a spectrum. Okay. At some point, his father learned about his wife's lifestyle and the way he was raising his kid. He comes back from the ship. And he's like, what's going on? And he kidnaps John.
Oh my God, what?
Yeah.
He kidnaps John?
Basically. It's his son.
He takes him. Yeah.
And if I remember right, he was going to bring John to New Zealand with him.
You know what? It's funny. As you're saying these things, the little bits I sort of remember from like reading the biography or whatever are things like, and then John spent some time with his dad.
Right.
It was like kind of statements like that.
Right. But for clinicians out there, they will know this story, or people who've been through stories like this. Like, whenever you have that kind of highly contentious couple with a kid and a quote unquote promiscuous mom who's drinking all the time, this is a very, very common story.
Right.
Where there's custody battles and quote unquote kidnappings and stuff. Yeah. Julia eventually found them, and there was a fight, and the parents forced John to choose between the parents.
Oh my God.
This is at the age of like 3 or 4 years old.
Oh my God.
And as very typical, because John missed his dad so much and saw his dad as like a Disneyland dad, chose his dad.
Okay.
And he felt incredibly guilty that, he had to reject his mom to her face.
Guilty at 3.
Yeah. But in the end, his mom got custody of him, and the dad basically disappeared. And the dad disappeared. To John, he disappeared because he didn't care. And of course, Julia would reinforce that notion.
Sure.
But to the dad, he was like, I tried, but your mom was so overpowering and so conflictual that I just decided it was
Right.
best if I just didn't come around anymore. And of course, the dad also had attachment issues and blah, blah, blah. So at the age of 4, the parents officially separated and divorced, and he went to go live with Aunt Mimi and Uncle George. Why he didn't still live with Julia, I don't know. But I think it's Julia was not really interested in being a mom.
That's crazy.
Aunt Mimi and Uncle George didn't have any children, so that kind of worked out for John.
Yeah.
And again, massive abandonment, right?
Yep.
I mean, we've already multiple attachment injuries, and he's not even 5 years old yet.
That's so insane.
His relationship with Aunt Mimi, or Mimi, I don't know how you pronounce it, and George was supposedly good. Again, he's
Mimi.
he's an only child, so he got lots of attention. Reportedly, he had a good relationship with his Uncle George, and from what I can tell, it was a good enough relationship with Aunt Mimi. Julia remarried. Did you know this?
I don't know. I don't think so. But I will comment on one thing. It's like, I think, because this is where a lot of the stories pick up.
Right.
It's like, John, blah, blah, blah. And then his parents, and then he was living with uncle and auntie. And
Right. They don't talk about...
Right.
Because I think even if people know about this, they're like, well, John was young. What does it matter?
Yeah.
But it's like his personality was 90% formed by the time Julie, he went to go live with Aunt Mimi.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Julia remarried, started a new family. She had 2 more kids, and she didn't take John back. So imagine that.
oh my God.
Imagine that. Your mom, who's still alive,
Right.
living just like a couple miles down the street, is now married and having kids, and you can't go see your mom.
Yeah.
Imagine the abandonment.
Oh my God.
And
Is Mimi her sister?
Yeah. John's early personality is reportedly very much like his dad, a prankster, a jokester, but he was also a bully. Did you know this?
He was a bully.
Yeah.
So that's some of the stuff I remember from, like, in his prep school years or whatever, like how he was kind of a dick.
Right. So in the romanticized version of this, it's like, well, John, he was always caustic.
Yeah.
He was always like above it all. But no, he was a dick.
Yeah.
He was a jerk bully who would harm and abuse other kids.
Yeah.
And totally uncool.
I do remember him like saying something about that in some interview, like just how horrible he was when I was a kid or something like that.
Yeah. He drew funny pictures of people. He would make fun of teachers. He was disruptive in class. And again, I've seen a lot of clients like this, just sort of a classic scenario. Massive attachment injuries, lots of sorrow, lots of trauma. And guess what? In school, they're struggling. They're having a hard time with relationships. They're bullying other people. They might be being bullied as well. They're getting in fights and stuff. Disruptive.
Right.
A teacher thought that he was going to totally fail at school. So they're like, well, he likes to draw, so maybe he should go to art school.
Yeah.
Age 14, 15, his Uncle George dies. So this is a big loss. Basically, his dad, his only dad figure, dies when he's a teenager. That's a big loss. Age 16, and so now we're getting into the Nowhere Boy movie. It's on Netflix, actually. You can watch it. Berto. What do you know about his teenage years?
Well, I do know he was very much into art. I have a feeling like he mostly wanted to be an artist, and but he was really into music as well. He was a total troublemaker, and if I remember right, like he didn't really want to stay in school. Like he just wanted to kind of do his own thing.
Yeah. He started hanging out more with his mother at his mother's house because I think he was more mobile as an older teen, and they had a very companionate dynamic. She was more like a friend or a girlfriend.
Didn't his mom buy him a guitar or something?
Yeah. So his Aunt Mimi was not supportive of John's musician,
right.
Which makes sense. It's like, hey, kid, the chance of you making money is pretty slim. It's time that you get more serious about your studies.
What do you think? You're going to be the Beatles?
Yeah. It's so weird that she predicted that,
Yeah.
But the mom, Julia, was really into Elvis, and they would listen to Elvis songs and other music, from America, and they would dance around and they would learn how to play music on the banjo. And she bought him his first guitar. So to him, going to his mom's house was like this fun, playing music and stuff. Yeah. And this is perhaps where his personality starts to gel with his drive to make music. So again, imagine you're growing up, all you want is your love from your mother.
Right.
And it's constantly just over the horizon. And you're being rejected and you're hurt and you're in pain like over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden, you come into her life, you get a little bit more connection with her, and she's really into music because Alf, his father, also played music.
Right.
And she drank and would go out and listen to music and listen to jukeboxes and stuff. And so John's looking at his mom, and mom's into music. Well, if I play music, mom and as I get interested in music, mom really gets, excited about that.
Yeah.
And so this infuses music with getting the love love it. This is where the
obsession comes in.
Yeah, obsession and a little bit of narcissism comes in.
Sure.
Just like if I become a performer, I get a little bit more love and attachment that I've always wanted.
That's interesting.
He started a band, the Quarrymen, named after his school. And again, Mimi didn't like it. Julia loved it. Julia would go to the shows and would clap and whistle louder than anyone else. So again, just further solidifying John's drive. Right. He met Paul and later George.
It's funny because you see those pictures of him when he's that age, and he looks so different. He because I don't think he wore glasses. He has like this little kind of peach fuzz kind of face.
Yeah.
And if you see him in action, you could probably tell quickly, oh, he's a rabble rouser. But if you see him in the static photos, he looks kind of a little like a nice young kid, like a nice little angel.
Yeah. Age 17, Julia died. Do you know the circumstances around her dying?
No, I don't remember.
A drunk off-duty police officer ran her or hit her with his car.
While she was walking?
Yeah, she was walking across the street.
Holy crap.
A friend of hers was nearby and was walking the other way and heard a loud thud and turned around to see Julia's body flying through the air.
Oh my
God. Julia landed 100 feet from where she had been hit.
Well, this is like slammed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Like thrown through the air 100 feet.
100 feet.
So I mentioned the details of her death because John would have known this.
Yeah.
John would have known it was a police officer who was drunk.
Right.
He would have known that she violently flew through the air and died. You know what I mean? And so not only is this obviously a trauma to him in terms of the violence and the suddenness of it.
Yeah.
While he was just starting to develop, the relationship he always wanted to with his mom, but it also is a form of abandonment. To have your mom die,
oh my God!
It's
and
like,
he had his dad essentially die. His real dad left. His quote unquote dad dies. Then his mom dies as he's developing this relationship.
And he's killed her, and she's killed by an off-duty cop.
How old was he?
17.
16,
17. And so he is, and doesn't really have a way of coping with this. By the way, the cop was acquitted of all charges. I guess.
Oh my God!
This problem extends into UK, and he was just given a short suspension from duty. He later left the police force and became a postman. So John could not bring himself to look at his mother's corpse when he was taken to the hospital. He was so distraught during the funeral that he put his head in his aunt's lap throughout the service.
Oh my God!
This is extremely traumatizing to him, just grief-stricken. One of the worst things, so I, treat a lot of people with personality disorders, and not often, but sometimes they will have a parent that will die while I'm treating them. And it will be a parent who mistreated them when they were growing up. Mm. And I have witnessed that loss is much harder to cope with than if you actually had a good relationship with your parents. Wow. Which seems ironic, right? It seems like, well, if you hated your mom because she was a terrible mother to you and she dies, you'd be like, well, good riddance, that, she never loved me anyway. but it's actually the opposite, because the person never got what they deserved or wanted or needed from that parent.
Yeah. And now it's permanently done.
Now it's permanent. And so now it's really gone.
Brutal.
Like, you're really never going to get what you want. And it makes it much, much worse. So, so John went through that horribleness, and guess how he coped? He went to therapy and he talked about his feelings. No. Guess, or people reached out to him, and
he became an even bigger, like, kind of.
Right. He started he was extremely violent.
Yeah.
And he drank a lot.
Oh, of course. Medicate, self-medicate, and lash out at the world.
And he got closer to Paul McCartney, who also lost his mother.
Of course. That would have been a total bonding point.
Yeah. So let's get into the Paul-John dynamic, but let's take a break first. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. If you haven't become a patron of the podcast, do so now. Sing a Beatles song about becoming a patron of the podcast.
If you want to support us, do us all a favor by becoming a patron. You can become a patron too. Patronize us today. Hooray.
Na 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 na.
Hooray.
Great. So become a patron of the podcast. When you do, you get access to a lot of secret, awesome stuff. Arguably, our best episodes are only available to patrons. And it's a way for us to know that you appreciate what we're doing. And it gives us, you're the wind beneath our wings. Did I say you're the wing beneath?
You're the wing that's on top of our wind, making us fall.
I love my parents to death, but I have acquired their twisted tongue and their inability to say idioms. They both have a hard time with idioms.
Better to have a rock in hand than a bushel in the foot.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the Paul-John dynamic, what can you say about that?
Okay, so I think John was probably, again, chip on his shoulder and always sort of combative, probably really high opinion of himself, and very, very like judgmental of others, very high standards. So imagine when this kid, he's like, oh, I hear, this Paul McCartney, or this kid Paul, right? And he's like, well, can you play? But for the first time probably ever, he runs into someone who can, like, basically better than him, and who knows so much about music in that context that he's like, okay, I guess I got to give you some sort of respect. Yeah. And then they start talking, and yeah, they have things in common. They like the same kind of music. They're the same age, basically.
Well, actually, that's actually not true. I mean, to us, looking back, they're similar age, but they're about 20 months apart.
Oh, that's a big deal then.
Right. When you're 17,
that's a good point.
And you're hanging out with a 15, barely a 16-year-old, John definitely is the older one.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so Paul so actually now I can think of that dynamic even more interesting, because John is probably like, I can take this kid under my wing, but at the same time I respect the hell out of him.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I'm in charge because I'm the older kid.
Right.
And he's a talent. And so it kind of balances out. John can still feel superior, but he also really wants what Paul has to offer.
That's really good to point out, because I always pictured John and Paul sort of the same age. Then there's the little George, and there's the older Ringo.
Ringo, I think, is the same age as John.
He's a little older, but
maybe just by a couple months. I think he's born the same year that John was born.
I thought he was like a year older.
1940, yeah.
Well, I always had it like backwards.
George was 3 years younger.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years younger than John. But anyway, so when you look up on the internet the relationship between Paul and John, what do you think that they talk about?
On the internet?
Yeah.
Oh, they probably say like, hey, they co-wrote some of the greatest songs ever, but then they fought a lot afterwards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The internet is obsessed with their so-called feud.
Yeah.
It's like, and to people, I find that to be extremely surprising to me, because to me, I know the real story, which is that from the day they met until the Beatles broke up, they were best friends. Yeah. And at the end of the Beatles, there was some bickering, but they were still friends.
They went through a period of a serious period of conflict. But
Well, what kind of conflict? It wasn't like the way that people think it was. You've been in bands. I've been in bands with you. I've been in bands. There are times when there's tension.
Yeah, I know, but it wasn't like you and me. There was
Not like you and me, but like not as bad as I think the way that they portray it to be.
it was okay. Fair enough. It was like me and one of our ex bandmates.
Okay. But even then, during that time, we were all still
Yeah,
friends.
and we were all still hanging out, and then I'm still friends.
And there were times when there were issues and complaints and stuff.
I saw a recent interview with Paul. Was it Howard Stern? I don't know what he was on, but he was talking about Howard Stern was like pushing on him about when they were trading songs back and forth, right, and hitting each other pretty hard, especially John, and but Paul made a point to say we were definitely not, I paraphrase him, not in a happy place between us at that moment, but we reconnected and we patched it up, and I was so grateful that we did, because then he got killed, and it would have been terrible, horrible if we hadn't,
And it was only probably a couple years where they were so-called feuding through the press and through these songs, which I'll get into later. But very quickly they started hanging out again, and even while they were writing those songs, it wasn't like they hated each other with a passion. Right. It was more like they were just kind of taking some pot shots at each other. Right. And they're 27 at the time or something. They would have been 30-ish. But
as you know, I have experience with people that I consider friends, that consider me friends, and that have had the equivalent of those kinds of vitriolic songs, right? Not in a song form, but like in an email form, for example. Yeah. And, even then, even when I got those emails, I never thought this is the end of our relationship.
Right. You say, well, think about it, all you people out there who have been in long-term relationships. Have there been times when you have wanted to have your spouse get run over by a bus? Right. Or you're so angry, right, you're so upset, you're so pissed off at that person, right, that you'll even say horrible things. And then you make up and you're like, I'm sorry I said those things. That's what John and Paul were like.
And to your point, the rest of the time we're talking about them living together. Yeah. Living together. Think about living with a bandmate. Right. The whole time for years and years.
They did everything together.
Yeah.
They went to India together. Yeah. They did movies together. In the early years, they talk about this in the documentaries, how the van that they would use to tour Britain with and maybe Germany was so cold that because it didn't have any heat, that the four of them would lay on top of it.
What do they call it? The Beatles sandwich or the Beatles?
Yeah. And because that kept them warm. Yeah. So imagine you got four, 21-year-old kids piled in a van, huddling together for warmth, and how good of a friends you would have to be. So that's, I just find it, like when you talk about Oasis.
It's like, Paul, why are you putting your finger there? That's not my finger, John.
Yeah. Those aren't pillows, to you planes, trains, and automobiles fans out there. So the other movie is the Two of Us movie that talks about them in the 70s-ish time, which portrays their relationship. They would visit and blah, blah, blah. Anyway.
Right.
So, yeah. Now, about how they came together in the beginning, I agree with you, Berto. They were a good match. Paul, I think, given his mom dying when he was quite young, Paul acquired the narcissistic version, but he was raised well enough by his dad. His dad didn't have the problems that Julia had. Paul McCartney had good enough attachment so that he didn't have to resort to a coping style that was too drastic, but he did adopt some narcissism. Yeah. As anyone who knows Paul McCartney, he comes across. Now, his problems weren't as bad as John Lennon's.
No, he seems a lot more centered.
Yeah.
Even when they were young.
Right. His relationship with Linda wasn't tumultuous. He didn't, and we'll get into the problems that John got into in life that are really quite common for people with borderline. But anyway, so John is, they're both teenagers. Paul is more the narcissistic, and so he's more aloof, but stable. And John is more unstable and needy. And so they kind of fit together in that way. Okay, so college years, they keep playing music, and they met Stuart Sutcliffe. And what do you know about him?
Stu was the artist, the true artiste. I mean, they all sort of looked up to Stu's artistry, and he was very good looking, apparently. I mean, I've seen the pictures. He was a good looking guy.
Yeah, he looked like James Dean.
Yeah, wore his sunglasses a lot. They wanted him to be in the band, but he didn't really want to be in the band. And so like he would play bass, but he didn't really play bass very well. And mostly he wanted to be an artist. And John really kind of looked up to that, you know. He really respected that.
Right. So Stuart Sutcliffe was more on the level of John. You know, Paul was younger and George is younger. And so Stuart came on the scene and was much more of an intellectual equal to John Lennon. You know, he was sort of tougher than Paul was. And so John really took to him, and they became best friends. And John was, as you say, enamored with him. Stuart Sutcliffe was super cool. And
he was the rock star.
Yeah, and there's evidence that John and Stuart might have had a sexual relationship as well. And in this way, we see that John starts to switch from Paul to Stuart in terms of his attachment. Yeah. So a theme for borderline people is that they will be, once they latch on to someone and they perceive that a relationship has the potential to be strong, they will forego all their other relationships because they're so worried about this one relationship not going well. So they pour all of their energy into one relationship because if they're worried if they diffuse their energies, no one will stick around.
So Stu was the original Yoko.
Well, Paul was, I think, Julia was the original.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing he also had some best friends in his youth prior to Stuart that are less famous that he did this to as well. But yeah, so Stuart Sutcliffe definitely.
I see. So what you're saying is John, as a pattern, when he had a new kind of, okay, this is my new attachment.
Right.
He'd be like, everyone else, be gone.
Right. And that one person becomes all good.
Right.
They become perfect. They become like the answer to his dreams.
So Paul at first was perfect.
Probably, yeah.
And then they fought for the rest of their relationship.
This is the time of the Backbeat movie that came out in 1994. That Astrid and they're developing their sound in Hamburg and all that kind of stuff and their look. Age 20, Pete Best joined the band. They start playing at the Liverpool's Cavern Club.
Also a good-looking individual.
Right.
You know, he also had the look.
Yeah. And also wasn't a very great musician.
In fact, him and Stu were so like better looking because Paul had a nice a pretty face, but it was kind of a normal pretty face, right? But these guys look kind of like the part,
right?
So they actually didn't fit. Like they didn't look like Beatles.
Yeah. They started getting a following at this point, a local following in Liverpool. 1961, age 21, discovered by Brian Epstein at Liverpool's Cavern Club. They had an interesting relationship, John and Brian. What do you know about it?
So actually, I got a graphic novel about Brian Epstein, which is really great.
Can you? Do you still have these things?
Yeah.
Can you bring them over sometime?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you bring over the Sandman ones?
Yeah.
Because like I want to see if I would enjoy these.
Sure.
Things.
I will bring a little care package for you next time.
Okay.
But so this one, it was actually a recent book they released. It's just the sort of the life of Brian Epstein, and it's really done artistically really well. And it doesn't just consider when he came into the Beatles' life. It starts before that, but obviously it ends while he was with the Beatles.
Right.
I know that Brian was a very, very smart, obviously a very astute individual because he didn't just like, oh, these guys have a following here. Like he saw way beyond. Like he was truly a visionary in that sense. Like he was like, I see really, really big things for you. He had they loved him. Like they had a really strong relationship. And I think he started having some, he started having some issues down the line where, it's probably like he was a little naive, like a little, not naive is not the right. He thought too good of people, maybe.
Well, what do you think about their relationship?
Oh,
though?
between him and John? I think there might have been a little bit of an attraction there. Like, I think Brian was probably really enamored physically, romantically of John. And so that was part of like one of the ingredients into his, I think he overall just, admired the hell out of John. And maybe it was a little parental, like an older brother sort of thing.
Right. That's my take on it, is father, older brother kind of thing. And because now, of course, John and all the Beatles had a complicated, multifaceted relationship with Brian Epstein, but John, given his issues with authority and with parents, was not always very nice to Brian Epstein.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Again, not talked about, but there were reports from, credible sources that John would bully Brian sometimes.
Oh.
Because again, John naturally doesn't like authority very much.
Yeah.
The cop that ran over his mom, his dad, all these people that have let him down, and he's like, screw those people. And so Brian Epstein, kind of a father figure, Brian Epstein was Jewish and gay, and John would call him a faggot, and he would make fun of him being Jewish.
Oh.
And there were multiple accounts of this kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, you could see it as perhaps a friend ribbing another friend.
Yeah.
But other people are like, no, John was abusive to Brian Epstein. And, Brian just took it. So that's another thing that they don't talk about.
They don't talk, yeah.
Okay. And John would, I think, later on sort of admit to some of this stuff.
Oh.
So again...
that's not the picture I had.
Right. Now, they also had a good relationship, and they also probably joked around. They also probably had a very caring relationship because they were together all the time, especially during the touring years of 63 to 66. But it wasn't all roses. 1962, Stuart Sutcliffe dies. This is another massive blow to John, and John reportedly cried for days. So yet another loss in the life of John Lennon.
Yeah.
Ringo came to the band, and they...
by the way, sorry, that was a weird one too, because it was like a tumor, a brain tumor or something, like a head tumor.
It was not an aneurysm. It could have been an aneurysm, but it's unknown what caused it, but the theory was that during the days that Stuart and John and the rest of the Beatles were in either Britain or Germany, they would get into a lot of fights because John would get drunk and get in fights, and Stuart got hit in the head really hard once, and then complications from that later led to him having some kind of...
But it was so sudden, and he was so young.
Right.
It's like, what the heck?
Ringo came to the band, and they recorded Love Me Do, and it hit the charts, and the rest is a fast rise to becoming the most popular band of all time. As I said, best-selling band in history, over 1 billion units sold. Guess how many hits in 1964 they had? Top 40 hits.
Oh, top 40. Not even
we're talking 1 year.
1 year.
1 year.
64. On the charts, they must have had probably 10 songs.
12.
12 songs.
12 songs in the top 40. No, 12 songs at one time.
Oh my God.
You're right. The difference. So at one time. Top 40 songs, 1964. 12 songs.
12 songs.
So,
Can you imagine, you're in a band and you're like, hey, guess what? We broke the top 40. No, it's, hey, guess what? 12 of our songs are in the top 40.
John Lennon actually accidentally got his girlfriend pregnant. It's unknown if that was the only woman he was seeing at the time.
Sure.
Cynthia Powell. So he proposed to...
Is this Julian?
Yeah, this is Julian. So Cynthia and Julian. He's the first Beatle to get married. They kept it secret for the most part. What do you know about his relationship with Cynthia?
I don't remember much. I just know that what I do remember is that like he started growing apart, and it wasn't like conflictive, I don't think, but it just like he started distancing himself.
Interesting. So yeah, that's sort of the narrative that they'll give is like he was on the road all the time and maybe he wasn't really in love with her to begin with, blah, blah, blah. And all that is true. But also he was physically abusive to her.
Well, he did admit that in the songs, right?
Right. Which we'll get into later.
I used to be mad at my woman. I beat her
and kept her away from the things that she loved. So yeah, he was a classic domestic violence perpetrator.
Wow.
He would get jealous. He was controlling.
Yeah.
He would beat her to control her. He would beat her so he is, borderline and narcissistic. So she could incur his wrath if she were to give any hint that she was going to move away from him, even though he neglected her all the time.
Right.
And if she didn't stroke his narcissism, then she could also get beat.
Oh my God.
So not all borderline narcissistic people are domestically violent, but if you're of a certain beyond a certain threshold of borderline and or narcissism, you are going to mistreat your spouses. Because your spouses are going to trigger your traumas and are going to make you feel so much in pain that you're going to resort to things that you wouldn't do normalized to prevent that person from hurting you in the future, even though they didn't really hurt you. It just touched on a trigger for you, but you don't know that because you have a personality disorder.
Right. Oh my God.
And
Horrible.
he was paranoid that she was cheating on him, even though he was probably cheating on her the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's really awful to think about. Like, again, I've seen, I'm 47 years old. I've probably been a super fan since I was 15 years old. And I never knew he beat Cynthia. They don't talk about that in the documentaries.
Yep.
It's pretty awful.
That's horrible.
Julian is born, named after...
Julian Assange?
Julia.
Oh, duh.
Right. I'm glad you didn't draw that connection because...
I didn't draw that connection.
It never occurred to me, but that makes total sense.
That makes sense. It's so funny. I have a real disconnect when it comes to like names that are one sex versus the other and that they're related. Like this has happened to me many times where I'm like, oh, that's the masculine version of that name, or that's the feminine version.
Yeah. I think I'm similar. What's the feminine version of Humberto?
Humberta. I don't know. There isn't really.
How do you feel about Beto O'Rourke?
Right. Well, what's funny is since I was called Beto a lot, every time I saw like vote for Beto, I'm like, am I running? What's going on? Yeah, he did a great campaign. He did amazing things.
Is he Hispanic at all?
He must have some Hispanic in there, but O'Rourke is not a Hispanic last name.
Oh yeah. So to Julian, John would say, and because he's still alive and giving interviews and stuff, that. So what's your knowledge of Julian's relationship with John?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. There was Julian and Sean, right?
Yeah. So
I always had this impression like Julian saw less of his father than Sean.
That's true.
And so therefore, but I always, and again, this is my 80s understanding of all this, is I always thought of Julian as like looking up to his father and wanting to be like his father. Okay. And I'm only basing this on the fact that he looked like him, had long hair, and played a song that sounded like a song that John might have written or something.
Yeah. Yeah, again, in the documentaries, they kind of glance over this, but they don't go into what really the details of it.
Yeah.
According to one article, Julian will be saying, my father severely emotionally, this is an article written by someone else. John Lennon severely emotionally abused his son on several occasions.
Oh my God.
Berating and screaming at him until the boy was reduced to tears. Once Julian giggled and Lennon shouted back, "I hate the way you fucking laugh." Julian later stated that Paul McCartney was more of a father to him than his real father was.
Oh, so heartbreaking, dude.
Another article, this is Julian talking. Julian said that after his birth, after Julian was born, he only lived with his father for a couple of years. And then here's some quotes from Julian. After that, I only saw him a handful of times before he was killed. Sadly, I never really knew the man.
Oh.
I had a great deal of anger towards Dad because of his negligence and his attitude to peace and love.
So it's not like he learned music from his dad.
His dad just wasn't around.
Yeah.
He says that his dad was so into peace and love, but that peace and love never came home to me.
Huh.
So it's just awful.
Oh, man.
Just awful. But again, when you're young, and John would later say this, and you have attachment problems and attachment traumas, it distorts things.
Yeah.
He grew up with parents who did not care for him and rejected him and abandoned him. So when John has his own son, he's looking at his son. When you're raised well enough with, relatively few attachment injuries, and a child enters the world, you look at that child, it's a compelling force that forces you toward that child.
Right.
Especially when it's basically socially understood that you're in charge of that child's well-being. Right. And especially as that child kind of comes to you and asks you for things. Well, if you're abused and neglected and abandoned when you're a child, you literally don't have neurons that are the same as other people do. You don't have the same connections. And so you look at this other, human being and you're just like, what, What
am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Because, parenting is incredibly inconvenient.
Right.
Incredibly inconvenient.
Right.
But people love to do that because they have neurons and neuronal connections that involve love and attachment and stability.
It rewards them in a different way than the inconvenience they're feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what compels parents. It just feels good because it's a reenactment of the feel-good experiences they had when they received that.
But if you don't have that,
if you don't receive that, then you don't get the same dopamine charge from that same behavior.
It's just the inconvenience.
It's just the inconvenience.
Holy crap.
Yeah. Because, every parent wants to scream at their kid about little things, like stop doing that,
Right.
But, most parents who have, normal attachment security don't act on those things or they modify it somehow. So, that's a story they don't talk about.
Yeah.
But Julian Lennon is quite open about this,
Wow. No, that's true. It's been so sanitized over. The flip side on this whole thing is I do hope that because, right now, imagine right now a famous musician, it comes out that he beat his first wife and he abused verbally or maybe even physically abused his first child. That person is done. Right now, they're done. Their career's over.
Maybe.
They're done.
Depending. But
Sure, to some degree, but
depending on their position, like if, Mick Jagger comes out or something or...
Well, and by that, yeah, sure, but there.
I guess look at Usher. All you get, or not Usher. Sorry, Chris Brown.
But Chris Brown's stuff came out several years ago. It was before the Me Too movement, before But
Chris Brown is still hated by a lot of people.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway.
Well, what I was trying to get at though,
that's proving your point.
Yeah, but what I was trying to really get at is, it's not to say that those aren't horrible realizations. That's horrible. What's interesting though is Lennon lived, even though he sadly was killed. He was still very young. He lived enough years to start coming out of the other side going, oh my God, I was a bad person, right? And what's interesting is we're not building sort of a model in society where people can learn and overcome their own abuse that they suffered, and therefore the abuse they're inflicting is because they never overcame their abuse.
Well, I don't know. I think that obviously, we're not doing enough, but there are examples like Jay-Z actually, when this is not the same thing, but it's similar. In his early years, he would rap about misogynistic, things and call, women bitches and lots of really horrible things. His videos would be objectifying. And he would give interviews about hey, this is how, it's just how guys are. It's how this, that's how we are in the streets, fuck you. This is how we are. And he would, rap about violence and killings and stuff. And I listened to him, I think he was on Fresh Air with Terry Gross, just a couple of years ago. And Terry Gross asks him about this because it's a very NPR or public radio thing to do, to ask a rapper about. It's like you got to ask that question because that's what their listeners want to know. And I actually was curious of the answer, and I was expecting Jay-Z to be like, well, it's the streets. I was just speaking from my experience, because that's what they always say. This is my world. Get away from me, white person interviewing me. You don't know my world. This is my world. But what he said was something completely different from that. What he said was, well, when I was young, me and all the guys I hung out with, we were incredibly insecure. And we didn't have a way of asserting that, or we didn't have a way of coping with that fear and insecurity. And so we would make up this persona that we were tough. Yeah. And one of the ways that you signal to this is my words, paraphrase. One of the ways that you signal to everyone that you're tough is you're misogynistic, that you don't care about bitches, and you don't care about violence, and you're not afraid. But we were all just scared little boys. Yeah. And I just celebrated when I heard him say that, because I've always thought that was the case. Right. All that posturing and all that machismo, I'm like, my God, those guys have to be insecure. Right.
But so he's the exception in that, not that he's the only one. I'm just saying, like, going through that cycle, and he obviously experienced a lot of success, and so he's probably had a lot of new windows opened up in his mind about the world and all these things. So he's come to this realization he's not been killed at a young age.
Well, and he's more mature.
Right. But what I'm saying is, like, if you take right now, you find out that, this 122-year-old guy is beating his girlfriend, right? So the first part that happens makes sense. Everyone's like, oh, that's terrible. Stop it. Arrest him. Do that. Okay, fine. Yeah, it's terrible. You got to stop it. That's not acceptable. But what never happens is, oh, let's talk about this. Why are you doing, like, what happened to you?
Right.
And that's what never happens.
Right. Exactly. When I treat domestic violence, intimate partner violence perpetrators, I often find that they suffer from borderline or narcissism or some other personality disorder, or paranoid personality disorder. And I always find that underneath all that, the reason why they have that personality disorder is because they had a childhood like John Lennon. Yeah. And they are suffering greatly, and they have massive traumas about abandonment and about being harmed by other people, and they will lash out. Similar to the way a Marine vet coming back from the war in Afghanistan, when he hears a loud explosion, he thinks it's an IED, and his whole body goes into a state of shock and terror, and he might be a little irritable in that moment. Right. That's exactly the same neuronal experience of John Lennon coming home after being on tour, seeing his wife, whom he probably has some attachment to, and she is a little cold towards him, and that is like a loud explosion going off in his mind of reminding him of his mother, who wasn't very loving to him, would abandon him, and then John would feel extremely hurt, and then would engage in some kind of verbal parley with her. Cynthia would probably try to defend herself, and it would escalate, and then John would start beating her. Yeah. It's not moral. It's not a justification, but it is a reason that a good moral human being would resort to something as awful as that. Right. 1964, John was informed that he had a half-sister. So remember that? Yeah. And he had never known about that.
Oh, wow.
And he found out that she was adopted in Norway. And again, how do you think he reacted to this?
Because this is the one that she was forced to give up.
Right. So this is the one that was born just after he was born.
Right. Well, I think that to follow his pattern, he was one of two things. Either he was like, new person in my life, I'm going to go obsess about her, and this is my Julia replacement. Or it was too painful because it represented Julia abandoning someone like him, and then he in turn was turned a cold shoulder.
Very astute. It's the first one. Okay. He became obsessed with her. He was really upset about it. Again, a massive loss. He hired people. He put ads in the paper to try to find her. Yeah. He hired detectives to try to find her. And it's so funny, in today's world, you would so easily find that person.
Right.
But back then, you couldn't. And guess what? They never found her. To this day, they've never found John Lennon's sister.
Oh, no. You're kidding me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because the way they did adoptions back then, it was, they would just burn the records.
How did he find that he had a sister?
I don't know. I mean, they would have known in the family.
Yeah.
Julia.
Okay, someone in the family.
Aunt Mimi would have known, blah, blah, blah.
By the way, something I need to tell you is you had a sister. Okay.
At 1964, of course, there's lots of songs that John wrote, but I want to highlight one. It's one of my favorite Beatles songs, I Don't Want to Spoil the Party. So this is in line with this borderline. And so when I read these lyrics, I'm like, because, love songs have a borderline quality to it, don't ever leave me. I can't live without you,
Well, sorry, go ahead.
But there are certain songs that John wrote that are, I think, particularly, because there's a specificity to the lyrics where you're like, oh, that's a specific to what I understand to be John's personality.
Well, and before you get to this one, as you've been just saying that and everything we've been discussing about him being abusive, all of a sudden songs like
Run
you better
for your
run
life.
for your life. You can't live.
We'll get to that in a second. Right. So I don't want to spoil the party. I've had a drink or two. And I don't care. There's no fun in what I do if she's not there. I wonder what went wrong. I've waited far too long. I think I'll take a walk and look for her. Though tonight she's made me sad, I still love her. If I find her, I'll be glad. I still love her. So it's a specific love song in that he's talking about being hurt by her.
Right.
And he's drinking, which is in line with John. And he's wondering what went wrong. But he also needs her so much. There's no fun in what I do if she's not there. Mm-hmm. I think I'll take a walk and look for her, and he's talking to a friend. And
it's funny because like you as a listener, everyone could sort of maybe relate to that general feeling like, oh yeah, like when you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend and you like break up, it's so painful. But he's literally describing his feelings.
Right. When you know about his true life,
right,
it puts a totally different spin on the lyrics. Right. 1965, other songs that he wrote during this time that are notable, I think, revealing to his personality. What songs from 65 can you... Run for Your Life is one of them, but he wrote a number of songs in this year.
Isn't Day in a Life 65?
No, that's
66?
67.
67?
Well, Sgt. Pepper is 67.
But he wrote it in 66 probably.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, 65. Like Nowhere Man.
Yeah, that's one.
And
so In My Life.
In My Life, right.
And Help.
Which actually, it's funny that In My Life is that early on.
Yeah.
Because that one sounded like a little more down his development.
Rubber Soul, Revolver are 65, 64, and Help. I think Help, Rubber Soul, and Revolver are the three best albums that they had.
By the way, I was just listening to Revolver a couple days ago, and it had been a while since I listened to it back to back. First of all, I kept thinking in my head it was like 10 songs.
You mean
long.
front to back?
Oh, yeah, front to back. I kept thinking in my head it was like 10 songs long.
Yeah.
But a song would come on. I'm like, oh my God, this song's in this album. That's crazy. And then the next song, I'm like, oh my God, this song's in this album.
Well, if you had the American Revolver, it probably did have 10 songs. Because the American versions, they would chop up to sell more records.
Well, this was the full one. So it had 14 songs.
Right.
And so,
I'm just saying.
Right. If I remember,
when you were younger.
That's probably right. I probably remember. And so then we're getting through, and it's getting to like the 10th song, and I'm like, and I keep being amazed of just how many good songs there are in that album.
Yeah. So the song Help, when I was younger, so much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way. Right. So this is the narcissistic mantra. I didn't need anyone's help. I want to get back to that. I was okay on my own.
Right.
Of course, that wasn't true.
Right.
But now these days are gone. I'm not self-assured.
Yeah.
Now I find I've changed my mind. I've opened up the doors.
Yeah.
Help me if you can. I'm feeling down.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate you being around. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please help me?
He's screaming out.
Yeah,
for help.
But it's sung
literally.
But it's sung in a jangly major chord.
Isn't that amazing? Like, that was one of the things that they did so well. They presented this little pop veneer, especially John, with these like, oh my God, he's screaming for help.
Right. And John loved that song. Like years later, he would talk about how Help was one of his favorite compositions. Nowhere Man. He's a real nowhere man sitting in his nowhere land. So this is John talking about himself. So I always thought this song was more psychedelic. You know, it was like about a nowhere man, you know, who he was talking about Nixon or something, you know, but he's talking about himself. Yeah. He's a real nowhere man sitting in his nowhere land, making all his nowhere plans for nobody. He's just like, I'm nobody. I live in a nowhere land, and I'm making all my nowhere plans
for nobody.
For nobody.
Wow.
Doesn't have a point of view, knows not where he's going to. Isn't he a bit like you and me?
Yeah.
Nowhere man, please listen. So he's talking to himself.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're missing. Nowhere man, the world is at your command. He's talking. So this is at a time when they're at the height of Beatlemania. And he's like, John, you know, so to himself, he's suffering and he's like, I'm nothing. I'm nobody. But he's like, don't you understand? The world is at your command.
Yeah.
He's as blind as he can be, just sees what he wants to see. So this is a classic borderline narcissistic state where you don't have a self, you can't soothe yourself.
Right.
And you're suffering in a great way. Totally changes my idea of this song now that I understand his personality. Another song in my life. Why don't you do the lyrics? This is your favorite song, right?
Not my favorite, but it's my mom's favorite song actually.
Oh,
but it's definitely one of my favorites.
In the past, you've said it was one of your favorites.
Oh, of John's. I might have said
of all time of the Beatles. I could have swore you said this was your favorite Beatles song.
No, if I did, I was high on mushrooms that day. Just because it would be impossible for me not to have a Paul McCartney song be my number one.
Okay.
But still,
sing the lyrics.
There are places I remember all my life, though some have changed, some for better, not for some for ever, not for better. Some have gone and some remain. All these places had their moments with lovers and things. Friends I still can recall. Some are dead and some are living. In my life, I love them all.
Right. So in this song, he is talking about Julia. He's talking about his uncle. He's talking about Stuart. And it's just interesting, again, to think about how important relationships were to him.
Yeah.
You know, the stereotype is that Paul is the sentimental one and John is not. Right. But when you really look closer at it, John was much more sentimental.
Oh yeah, Paul's songs are very detached actually.
Yeah.
Like even his sentimental songs, you could say, oh, but Yesterday is sort of now look, I love Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
But when you look at his lyrics are what someone who doesn't fully understand those sentiments would expect those sentiments to be.
Well, I'm not going to go that far.
I'm going to go that far.
I'm just going to say that Paul, because he was raised well enough, but had a narcissistic streak, wasn't as vulnerable as John was. So when you compare Yesterday to Norwegian Wood or to Hey, You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. So in fact, that's probably a better comparison. Yesterday, You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. I think they were written in the same year. You've Got to Hide Your Love Away is so much more vulnerable.
Yep.
You know, here I stand head in hand, turn my face to the wall.
Yep.
Like, that is sad.
I mean, so...
And can't come from any other place than reality.
Absolutely.
A song like Yesterday, you could see how someone would just, you know, write that song and it would be, okay, that I guess that encapsulates an experience I might have had. But here I stand head in hand, turn my face to the wall, you know, feeling 2 foot small. That comes from a place, obviously, that John was feeling at the time.
Right. So like certainly later and especially in Paul's solo career, Paul grew and evolved and got a lot more personal and things like
In
that.
fact, one of the best examples of this was a song that Paul wrote about John after he died,
Right.
which I'm trying to remember the tune of it. There art there, what a attitude as you were here today. Here today, like it's a beautiful song and very heartfelt and like
so he
vulnerably sung and blah,
absolutely.
blah, blah.
So he of course grew. What I mean is like, and this actually, when I was younger, me and my friend Shun, we would get in debates about the Beatles, and he loved John a lot more than he loved Paul. I loved Paul a lot more than I loved John, and it actually made sense with our personalities because see, I had a similar kind of happy-go-lucky. So if I'm going to write a song about love, it's going to be about like some idealized version of love, not about true pain or true like.
Well,
right?
and more broadly, your personalities are more of the templates of John and Paul.
Absolutely. Now, as I grew older, by the time you and I were doing music, I actually was starting to write a lot more about sort of real feelings, but still a mix of like idealized and some of my feelings, right? And then as I wrote my set of songs I wrote with Plastic Polly, a lot more real stuff came out. Certainly the piano songs I've written, that's as real as it gets.
Yeah.
But
when's that?
Never. When I look at Paul's...
I did a recent deep dive on perfectionism.
Yeah.
So to those people out there, we've talked about this before, Berto has spent thousands upon thousands of dollars and years of his life flying down to LA and recording with a session band and producers and everything. Just, I believe 10 songs, right? On piano, which I'm guessing are amazing tracks, even without any production. And you have yet to release them to anyone to listen.
Well, part of the problem is there's a logistic problem in that they're not mixed. There's
but again, who cares?
Yeah.
Even if they're not mixed well, like you can mix them.
Sure.
I can mix them.
Sure.
You and I have mixed. We've mastered. Yeah. We're not amazing, but we're probably like 95% as good as someone else could be. And is that a perfectionistic thing? Like, are you worried that it's not going to be perfect? Are you?
Well, I mean, part of it is I guess I could request the raw tracks, and part of it is I don't have the masters.
Forget about maybe now, because maybe that ship has sailed to you. Why, for the 5 years you were doing it, was it impossible for you to actually complete that project?
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, that was a mix of perfectionism. Also,
like specifically what? Like worrying about?
Well, part of it honestly was I wasn't good enough yet for the songs I had written. And as you know, when you have to record them, it's a very different thing than when you just write them.
Good enough on piano?
On piano and singing.
Oh, really?
I actually say more on the singing side than
so
on the
you
piano
wrote
side.
vocal parts that you couldn't sing?
That I couldn't sing consistently enough to record them well.
Wow.
Now, but
why didn't you just rewrite the parts?
I just didn't know. Remember, I wrote these songs like 12 years ago, right? But now I actually have most of the tracks pretty close to done. Now it's more of a logistic silliness of like, I just need to schedule a time that works for both of us to fly down there, finish up the bits of things and be done with it.
Well, don't you have all the backing tracks recorded?
Yeah, I just don't have them.
But just get them and
I could just
finish it up here.
Yeah, that's a good point. But
you paid for it. Yeah. I mean, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right.
The listeners want to hear those songs.
They do. I think they do. What I was trying to say, though, was with Paul, a lot of his early songs, they are so well-crafted pop songs. But the lyrics, the meaning of it is a lot more superficial.
Right.
Some of them are touching, but the ones that are touching are almost a little third person.
Well, yeah.
Like For No One?
It's hard to really generalize like that. I think I agree. If we're going to compare John and Paul, this is definitely true.
Yeah.
But I think there are some songs that I can't really tell how Paul actually felt about the songs, but I'll tell you, they get me.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, my favorite Beatles song, and maybe like if I did a top 10 Beatles, a lot of them would be Paul songs.
So I actually did this. So
You and I ranked, remember?
Yeah.
We ranked, and a lot of my tops were Beatles.
So,
of course they were Beatles.
Well, we'll get into that in a bit because it'll come up. But anyway, so again, you mentioned "Run for Your Life." So let's read these lyrics in light of our knowledge that John was physically abusive in a classic sense to Cynthia. He wrote this song while he was married to Cynthia.
I'd rather see you dead, little girl, than to be with another man.
You better keep your head, little girl, or you won't know where I am. You better run for your life if you can, little girl. Hide your head in the sand, little girl. Catch you with another man. That's the end, little girl.
And I always thought that was kind of a cute little song.
Right. Totally. Until I did this deep dive this week. I was like,
oh my God.
Well, it's just a cute song. He's just being...
he's exaggerating.
It's hyperbole.
Of course.
Well, you know that I'm a wicked guy, and I was born with a jealous mind. And I can't spend my whole life trying to make you toe the line. You better run for your life if you can, little girl. Hide your head in the sand, little girl. Catch you with another man. That's the end, little girl. Let this be a sermon. I mean everything I've said. Baby, I'm determined, and I'd rather see you dead.
I mean, the song opens with, I'd rather see you dead.
I'd rather see you dead than to be with another man.
Yeah.
Yikes. Yikes.
That changes a lot.
And then he tops it off at the end. Let this be a sermon. I mean everything I've said.
Yeah.
Baby, I'm determined, and I'd rather see you dead.
And what's crazy is, at the time, they had all these gaggle of followers, and you can imagine them singing it and sort of taking it as like, oh, he loves her so much.
Right. And mores were different at the time.
They were, yeah.
Where you could even potentially admit that these lyrics were literal.
Yeah.
And people would be like, similar.
Yeah, and even to the point of, I could imagine someone saying, well, I mean, if you catch your lover with someone else, what else are you going to do?
Right.
Right.
Did you know that in 1965, Alf, John Lennon's father, released a record?
No.
So my deep dive has brought so many things.
What? John Lennon's father in 65 released a record?
Yeah. Called That's My Life, My Love, and My Home. I encourage you, everyone, to Google this song. He actually changed, he has a stage name called Freddie Lennon.
What? Well, he's not alive, is he?
No.
Okay.
A quirky little song in which he mostly talks, and he sings exactly like John Lennon.
No way.
Yeah, it is crazy.
Oh my God.
The whole song is about him referring to the sea. The quotes are, I make no excuses for my abuses. I could blame the cruel sea for taking you away from me.
Oh my God.
So the whole song is him basically talking about his life, his love, and his home is the sea. And he's kind of like, it's an apology to Julia and to John, I think.
Wow.
And guess who played in the band, the session musicians, drummer Mitch Mitchell and bassist Noel Redding. Do you know those names at all? Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding?
No.
Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he must have got those connections because of who he was then.
No, this is before the Jimi Hendrix Experience. So later, those guys became...
Oh, right, 65.
Yeah.
Okay.
John and Brian Epstein were reportedly furious when this album came out, when this record came out. They saw it as Freddie trying to do a cash grab. It'd sort of be like Jay-Z has a long-lost father... And in 19...
Why do they care, though?
Well, because it...
damages...
Because it could look like... I could see Epstein being upset about it because it could look like it was a Beatles product.
Because it sounds like John?
Well, because it's John's dad. And it could be seen as like the Beatles were endorsing it or something. And it was shit. Do you know what I mean? It was a shitty track. And so John was interviewed about this, and he says, I saw him twice in my life till I was 22. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but that's what he says. When he turned up after I had a few hit records, I saw him and spoke to him and decided I still didn't want to know him.
No.
So John was very upset about his dad doing this, and the record never went anywhere. And there's speculations that John and Epstein actually
Killed it
somehow. 1966, they stopped touring. And instead of John rushing home and spending time with his family, he went to Spain to film that movie.
Oh, right. What was it?
Yeah. How I Won the War. Yeah. At this time, he met Yoko Ono. So what's the story of John meeting Yoko?
Yeah, he's at the art gallery for her presentation. He doesn't really know her yet, and he sees a little thing where there's a ladder and there's like a little tiny thing, and he has to climb the ladder, and when he gets up, he looks, maybe there's a magnifying glass or something, and it says, yes. And if it had been no, I wouldn't have been interested, but it was yes. So...
all bullshit.
Really?
So that might have happened.
Yeah.
But Yoko Ono was a groupie for the Beatles.
What?
She was one of the Apple, what they call them, the Apple women, or I can't remember what they call them.
Really?
Yeah. She was one of those women who would wait outside Apple Studios to try to get an autograph or get a kiss. And it was reported that she once forced herself into John Lennon's limo between him and his wife.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So Yoko was, one of those crazed groupies.
Yeah.
Who had met John several times, like as a groupie. And John,
wait, was she groupie number 9?
Yeah. And so the romantic story that she was just happening, to have an art show that John happened to be at.
Yeah.
And then he fell in love with her is, I guess partially true.
Yeah.
But they always leave out the fact that she was one of the groupies who would hang outside.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's completely misrepresented because I actually assumed the assumptions when you hear that story are John and her didn't know each other at all.
Right.
He's just at an art show that she's already sort of like this artist. And so they're almost on not equal footing, but they're both artists.
Right.
And then he goes and sees this and he's like, wow, this is a person and blah, blah, blah. Whereas instead, this paints a very different picture.
Instead, John is dating or having an affair with a groupie, essentially.
Yeah. And a very intrusive groupie.
So at this time, he starts using a lot of substances in addition to alcohol, opiates, heroin, pot, LSD. This is a very common thing for people with personality disorders, particularly men. They self-medicate, as we've been talking about, to deal with the psychic pain. Just because he's famous doesn't take away his attachment injuries, doesn't take away the intense psychological pain that he's going through all the time.
In fact, it could exacerbate things.
Right. all the incursions on his attachments, all the triggers that he's going. He's sleeping a lot, and he was probably depressed too. And
sleeping a lot, is that a symptom as well?
Yeah. If you're 1, depressed, you sleep a lot. 2, opiates, you fall asleep a lot. One of the big reasons why heroin and opiates are a big problem in America today is because opiates and heroin will absolutely take away. So John Lennon has a very common backstory.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a story that's similar to this. There is very little that will ameliorate that pain for people. Therapy could take 20 years to get rid of that pain. There's no SSRI. There's nothing that will take it away. But what does take it away is heroin and opiates, Percocet, OxyContin. These things do take it away.
Right.
The problem is, as you get used to those drugs, you need more and more of it to actually work. And there are side effects, like you could overdose on accident. Mm-hmm. So whenever I hear about the heroin epidemic, what I really hear is an attachment epidemic.
Wow.
Which is proven by research.
Yeah.
It's not an addiction problem. It's an attachment psychic pain problem.
Wow. I mean, the addiction comes with the territory, but it's not the cause.
How many people take opiates after a surgery or something?
Right.
And how many of them become massively addicted?
Right.
Well, they're It's those people who have been, because you'll hear people with attachment injuries, they'll say, yeah, I had my wisdom teeth pulled, I popped a Percocet, and for the first time in my life, I felt okay.
Wow.
Oh
my God.
That's an intoxicating experience.
Yeah.
So
that's a crazy thought.
So yeah. Pot can also help, kind of, not as much as opiates can. And LSD affects serotonin, so it makes total sense that would help him with his depression. This is when he wrote, I'm Only Sleeping. And again, when I heard this song when I was a teenager, I thought it was more metaphorical.
Yeah, totally, right?
And also kind of psychedelic. You know, I'm sleeping, I'm floating away.
When I wake up early in the morning. I mean, I always liked it in that sense of like, because I could relate as a waking up for school and you're like, oh, dude, I'm not ready for this, So I always thought of it like that.
This was one of the first songs that I had heard. So as I was getting into the Beatles when I was a teenager, I would have to acquire these albums, right?
Yeah.
And because you couldn't go on the internet and listen to music, you'd have to somehow get your hands on the albums. And there were times when I'd get a new album home and I'd put it on the record player, I'd put the needle, and I would get to tracks that I'd never heard before.
Right.
I'd be like, this is a Beatles song I've never heard before. And when I got to I'm Only Sleeping, that I remember the moment I heard this, the first line, that guitar sound, and it was like electric to me. I was like, how come I've never heard this Beatles song? It is one of the best one that's ever been written. Some of the lyrics go that typify, I think, what John was going through at the time. Everybody seems to think I'm lazy. I don't mind. I think they're crazy.
They're crazy.
Running everywhere at such a speed till they find there's no need. Please don't spoil my day. I'm miles away, and after all, I'm only sleeping.
Yeah.
Paul, in interviews, would talk about this. They would sort of gloss it over. They wouldn't talk about the heroin and the opiates, but they would talk about how John loved to sleep, and they did talk about how John was always late to things.
Yeah, I do know that. It's funny. So I did read a couple biographies back in college that did go, and I don't know how much, because these were like the unauthorized biographies. So I don't know how much of it was exaggerated, but they tried to go a little more into the dirt. And so they talked about all their sex in Hamburg, and they talked about the drugs and the fights and all these kinds of things. And one thing that always struck me is Paul always gave off this like very innocent, very boy next door vibe. But I mean, they were all... they were rock stars, they all partied hard too. I think one of the big differences is Paul, I guess, had less internal damage, so he was able to pull up out of the nosedives with greater success.
Exactly. He only would rely on pot eventually. Yeah. So 1967, he writes Getting Better. With Paul McCartney, but he writes some of the most key lyrics in this song.
It can't get no worse.
I used to be cruel to my woman. I beat her and kept her apart from the things that she loved. Man, I was mean, but I'm changing my scene, and I'm doing the best that I can. Ooh. Yeah. So in this song, he is just flat out admitting that I used to beat my woman and I was cruel to her. And there's a key line here. I kept her apart from the things that she loved. That's a classic DV perpetrator thing to do.
And again, whenever I heard and sang this line, I just, these aren't metaphors wonderful? But it's so funny. He spelled it out as clear as day.
Yeah.
Multiple times. And yet we all kind of like, they're just lyrics.
Yeah, and I'm sure, people like Charles Manson read into that as some other kind of thing when it's just like, nope, it's literally what he's saying. Brian Epstein died during 1967 of an accidental overdose. It's believed some people think it was suicide, but other people think it was accidental. It seems likely it was accidental. Just after Sgt. Pepper came out, again, a massive loss for John Lennon. Just tragic, just sudden, boom, just gone, right? Just imagine what that would be like for all the Beatles.
And he was their glue, especially in those points, because
and their dad.
Yeah.
So let's review his losses up to this point. Abandoned my dad, left at home by mom, abandoned my mom. Mom abandons him and has another family. She lives just down the road.
Oh my God.
Dad has another family.
Oh, right.
Uncle, dad dies.
Yeah.
Mom dies tragically. Best friend dies tragically, Stuart.
I mean, that's a lot of tragedy.
He finds out he has a half-sister that he can't find.
Yeah.
And then his father figure, Brian, dies tragically. And he's 26.
Yeah, right?
1968, he writes Julia. In India, he asked Donovan to help him write a song about childhood that John goes to Donovan and says, help me write a song about the child that I never really had with my mom. And Donovan says, well, when you think of the song, where do you imagine yourself? You know, when you think about the lyrics of this fantasy version of you and your mom, where do you imagine yourself? And John says, well, I'm at the beach and I'm holding hands with my mother and we're walking together. Isn't that very sweet?
That is very beautiful.
It's the only track to only have John on it. Of course, Paul did many songs on his own, even going back to Yesterday. But this is the only song Beatles ever did that John just didn't have any of the other Beatles on it.
But by the way, I just watched a video on YouTube with Donovan talking about when they were in India. And so, you know, he was a really good guitarist and had this finger picking down. And John was like, how'd you do that, mate? Right? And then so Donovan showed him. And so the way Donovan tells it, when he learned it, it took him, I think he said like 4 days to pick up or something like that. And then, or maybe it was 2 days. And then he said, it was 4, because then he said John picked it up in 2 days. And then he said George picked it up in 1 day. And then he said, now, of course, Paul, I didn't even show him. He just heard us doing it. And then like he immediately like got it and he did it in his own way. And then he wrote Blackbird. And it was a really great story.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the way they did things back then. Again, because they didn't have YouTube, so to learn a new guitar picking scheme. But John, because he was the least, proficient guitarist in the band, he used that pattern in a lot of different songs. Band, anyway. It's actually kind of a cool picking technique. But anyway, half of what I say is meaningless, but I say it just to reach you, Julia. Julia, Julia, ocean child calls me. So I sing a song of love, Julia.
Sing a song of love.
So he just, he's just like, I want to be with you. I want to be with you.
Well, and it's still, actually, I never thought of this, but then it goes, it's almost like, there's not much more I have.
Yeah.
I just have the memory of it.
Now, the song was also about Yoko. And because Yoko means ocean child.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Or forgot it. It's funny. I probably have forgotten so much about the Beatles because, I obsessed so much and then it's been years. So.
Yeah. And again, when I was a kid, hearing the song, I didn't even know his mom's name was Julia. No. I thought there was just some girl, some bird named Julia. Interesting though that so Julia was, Yoko was 7 to 8 years older than John. Did you know that?
I knew she was older. I didn't know she was that much older.
And would eventually call Yoko mother.
Oh,
by the way. Which wasn't that unusual back then. People make fun of Mike Pence for calling his wife mother, but in the olden days, like I think even my parents would do this. They would call each other mom and dad. Do you know what I mean? To their face.
Oh, well, okay, but I could see it as in like, because it's the mom of the house. So it's like,
right.
Oh, mom, would you? Yeah, I could see that.
Right.
But
like sometimes I call my mom Bachan, which is Japanese for grandma, but it's like she's not my grandma, and she's my mom. Anyway. But that's what everyone calls her because that's what the kids call her. Anyway,
okay.
So anyway, we'll get into more of that later. But the Yoko mother thing, kind of comes out in Julia a little bit. He wrote "Jealous Guy."
Right, jealous guy now also has more significance too.
Right,
it's not just like I'm a jealous guy. Everyone's a little jealous from time to time.
So this is kind of him maturing. So this isn't run for your life if you can. This is. So I was dreaming of the past and my heart was beating fast. So originally hearing that line, I was like, oh, he's in love, but really he's probably terrified of what he's done to some of these people. I began to lose control. I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry that I made you cry.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hurt you. I'm just a jealous guy.
By the way, Jealous Guy is quite possibly my favorite, but definitely top 3 John Lennon songs.
Yeah. I was feeling insecure. You might not love me anymore. I was shivering inside. So again, if you're just listening, it's like, oh, it's a metaphor. It's a love song. He probably literally was feeling so insecure and he was so paranoid that Yoko or Cynthia wasn't going to love him anymore that he was probably literally shivering on the inside. I was trying to catch your eyes, thought that you was trying to hide. I was swallowing my pain. So this is referring, I assume, he's at a public event and Yoko is across the room or something, and he's trying to catch her eye like, hey, you're making me jealous right now. You're talking to some man. And I thought you were trying to hide yourself from me. I was really in a lot of pain. I was swallowing my pain. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I hurt you. So by the way, it's not a surprise that he beat the shit out of Yoko too.
Yeah. I imagined that after what you said.
Right. So by now, in 1968, he's massively addicted to heroin, something they also gloss over.
So I didn't know that. I didn't know he had a heroin addiction.
Oh, yeah, massive
I
problem.
always imagined it was like, a little LSD,
right?
Little pot here.
No.
Little hashish.
Big problem with heroin. And it was hard to maintain.
Holy crap.
And his songwriting gets worse. So here's where I went through every Beatles song that I love.
Yeah.
And I got like top 35 or something. And so I made a spreadsheet. And of course you didn't have time to do this, but so I tabulated all of them. So before 68, before Brian Epstein dies, before his heroin addiction gets really into full swing, when I tabulate, I have 44 of my favorite Beatles songs, half of them written by John, half of them by McCartney.
Yeah.
So, you got songs like...
I still have my list somewhere, by the way.
Yeah. You got Day Tripper by Lennon. You got Hard Day's Night by Lennon. You got Ticket to Ride by Lennon. You got Paperback Writer by McCartney. You got Eleanor Rigby by McCartney. You have With a Little Help from My Friends by McCartney. So it's half and half, right down the middle. After the heroin addiction gets kicked in, after Brian Epstein dies, there are 11 McCartney songs that are in my top, and there are only 5 Lennon songs. And of those 5 songs, 4 of them were written before 68.
Oh.
Across the Universe was written while they were in India. Sexy Sadie was written while they were in India.
Which was about the Maharishi.
Strawberry Fields Forever was written in like 66, I think.
Right.
I Am the Walrus was written in like 67. The only song of mine, of one of my favorite songs that of John that he wrote after his heroin problem was Come Together. And that's not even really...
So give me a couple examples of songs that were after that are bad. Because
Well, not bad. Just
that weren't as good.
Other Lennon songs.
Yeah.
Everybody's Got Something to Hide.
Oh yeah. For me and my monkey.
Julia. Like
I like Julia.
I'm not a huge Julia fan.
But
again, he wrote that. He actually no, he wrote that before his heroin addiction got really bad. Mean Mr. Mustard. I Me Mine.
I see. So a lot of them get to be a little bit more.
Dig It.
A little more weird.
Let's see, one after 909, but he wrote that a long time ago. Anyway, so yeah, but then when you think about McCartney, The Long and Winding Road.
Yeah, they only get better.
Let It Be, Two of Us, You Never Give Me Your Money. That whole ending of it, and this all comes to light when you actually look at post Magical Mystery Tour. John Lennon's contributions become so much less.
Yeah, that's
and
interesting.
Actually, John would admit this. He would say, "Oh, those songs were crap. Like, I don't even know why we released that song."
Yeah.
McCartney, "Oh Darling,"
right.
"I Will," Paul McCartney, "Blackbird," "Obla Di Obla Da." So anyway,
that is. I mean, it's not surprising because everyone assumes like, oh well, the drugs is what made them so good.
Oh God,
It's like,
no.
what are you talking about? Like most of the hits happened before they even went to India.
The Beatles themselves, when they're interviewed, will say like, that's ridiculous. When we were super high, I mean, it sort of helped to expand our mind kind of, but when you're high, you can't do anything.
Right.
Like you can't, it's hard to do anything. He, during this time, wrote, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I haven't slept a wink.
I do like that song.
That's a great song. My mind is on the blink.
Yeah.
I wonder, should I get up and fix myself a drink? No.
No.
I'm so tired. I don't know what to do. I'm so tired. My mind is set on you. I wonder, should I call you? But I know what you would do.
But I know what you would do.
So that's such a borderline thing to say. I wonder if I want to call you, but I know what you're going to do.
Right.
You'd say, I'm putting you on, but it's no joke. It's doing me harm. I can't sleep. I can't stop
my brain. No, it's 3
weeks. I'm going insane.
Going insane.
You know, I give her everything I've got for a little peace of mind. So anyway, he gets into Transcendental Meditation with the Maharishi in India.
But I mean, I like...
This is when John discovers that there are answers to his pain that aren't drug related. Right. So he's always looking for answers to his pain.
Right.
And Transcendental Meditation provides some of those answers, and this kind of sows the seed for later therapy he gets into. At this point, he divorces Cynthia.
That late.
and after this point, he almost never saw Julian or her.
Yeah.
This is when Paul writes, Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Yep. Take a sad song and make it better. So he's writing this song to Julian.
Yeah. Such a good song. Definitely one of my favorites.
John thought that Hey Jude was giving John permission to be with Yoko, but it's so clearly about Julian.
Right.
And I think John was in psychological denial about that. So in this instance, we see that John's best friend is watching John exhibit his poor attachment to his son.
Right.
And because Paul had a stable relationship with his dad, could recognize that and has so much love for the world, actually reached out to Julian, who wasn't even his own son. Right. And Julian would later say that Paul was more of a father than his own father was. 1969, he marries Yoko Ono. And Yoko was equally attachment problemed herself.
I didn't realize he married her that late.
Yeah. And she didn't like the fact that he had a child with a previous wife. So she encouraged John not to contact Julian. So not that John would have anyway, but so this is where we get into two attachment disordered people getting together, and John really needing her and her really liking to be needed. So they had kind of a mutual attachment disordered relationship, very dependent on each other. The Beatles recorded their last album, Abbey Road, and they broke up. What do you know about their breakup?
Well, according to Paul himself, basically, John just didn't want to do it anymore. And he came in and he said, yeah, I'm out.
Why do you think they broke up?
Oh, why?
Why do you think John wanted to leave?
I mean, so there were a few factors. For one thing, he was probably not feeling good about himself, and he was trying to change his life probably for the better, but maybe he didn't see that the same things would work. He certainly didn't see eye to eye at that time with Paul. He probably felt like Paul was trying to control the band and things like that. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the internet, what they will say is that either Yoko did it, which obviously is an oversimplification, or they'll say that Paul was too controlling, right? But John was the one that left, and in my estimation, what happened was that it was a number of factors. One is that I think Yoko actually did have something to do with it. Not that she broke up the band, but that John, again, going from
obsessing with
right. Yeah. Because he was a one person.
Right.
He had gone from Paul to Yoko now. And Yoko actually provided him with something that Paul could never provide him, which is like a sexual motherly connection.
Yeah.
And Yoko was more attentive than Paul was. You know, Paul's another dude and has other interests, right?
Right.
And so John, for the first time, has this relationship with a mother wife who he, can completely be dependent on, and needs her so much that he brings her into the studio, which was like a huge no-no. Plus, it's like, we've been in bands before. It's weird to have randos in the studio.
Oh, totally.
It's like you need it to be as empty as possible.
And then you have randos who, one of the band members is like, well, why don't we do that one thing you were doing the other day?
Right.
Here, let's add you to this song.
Right. So Yoko Ono, some people will say she was like a cutting edge avant-garde musician. I think
there's different explanations for what she was.
Yeah. I would say that she had some interesting musical instincts, but she's not as compelling as John made her. It's sort of front and center on a lot of the albums. But anyway, so Yoko, was a factor, but it was more John's relationship, his neediness with Yoko, that made John completely shift his focus away from the band and towards Yoko.
Right.
And then because borderline people are all or nothing, if you're not in the good camp, then you're in the bad camp. And then John probably started treating everyone like shit at that point. Not horribly, but like not great.
Well, so as you know, the Let It Be experience was terrible for everyone involved. Recording the Let It Be album, and like George Martin was not involved. He's like, I'm out, right? And then basically they had grown so far apart that it was like everyone was just kind of recording their own stuff, and it was like it was a mess. By the time they did, this is the other thing that's amazing. By the time they did Abbey Road, which is really in real terms only like 1 year later, 2 years later
from Let It Be,
yeah,
it's like 6 months later.
Well,
they recorded Abbey Road in '69, and Let It Be was in '69 or late '68. I think it was early.
No, it was
69.
like a year because
no.
Yeah,
Let It Be. They recorded Let It Be, that album they were going to do on film. It was either late '68 or early '69. They recorded Abbey Road in later '69.
Well, but then because the story was like when Paul is the one who was like, oh, we should do one last album, right? And then what's his name? George Martin didn't really want to do it at first, but he's like, well, I'll do it if John is involved. And it was like, actually, this only makes my
they recorded it from through most of '68.
But this only makes my point even if it was like 6 months, because the way they tell the story, it was like 10 years had passed. The way they talk about it, like if you hear the interviews,
right,
they talk about it like 10 years had passed, but really it was like just like a few months or
actually
a year,
technically it was a month, because they ended recording on Let It Be in January of '69. Yeah. And they started recording Abbey Road in February of '69.
Okay, but they had started Let It Be a long time before.
Like a year before.
And so George Martin had been sort of out of the process for a long time.
Yeah.
But a long time for them was a year. For us, a year is nothing.
Right.
So, but they speak about it like, we're getting the band back together,
yeah.
right? All right, but in any case, what I was saying was that they had grown apart terribly in Let It Be. With Abbey Road, they sort of like pulled it together for one last hurrah.
Well, and what I would say is that it was George Martin and Paul McCartney who basically had three other musicians playing with them.
Sure.
Because when you look at John's contributions to that album, you don't see very much other than Come Together, right? George was coming into his own, so he was contributing more. But like I said, that second half, the second side of that album is like all Paul for the most part.
John threw his songs in there, but they're arranged and put together, and
Paul inserted them in there. You know what I mean? It was a grand scheme by Paul.
Yeah.
Now people will say, well, that Paul's so controlling, and I would say is like, well, just look at the bigger picture. He fucking salvaged that thing. Now, was Paul kind of a dick? I'm sure he was at times. So I would say Yoko was part of the reason. I also think that they just kind of needed to be on their own. They had too much talent for one band. I mean, you and I and Shun were in a band, and we had a similar situation where we're three front men who
all wrote songs,
all write prolifically, and are musicians. And when we were in a band together, we would switch off. Each one of us would take turns writing the next song, and we were in a band together for like a year, and I would have like 3 songs.
Yeah, right. That's true.
and we would be working all the time, and I was just like, but to me, I didn't mind that because I'm not that narcissistic. Other people, I think you and Shun didn't like that so much.
No. I actually did. I loved our band.
Oh, okay.
I loved, because the thing is, the little bit of my psychology is not only am I narcissistic, I also want for my father to succeed. And so when I have my buddies and we're doing something together, it's like my father's succeeding, right?
Okay.
And so the most important thing about music for me for the longest time was that I was in a band with friends.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I loved that too. So anyway, but you can't imagine if our band became mega famous that, and you were only able to release 3 songs
Absolutely.
every 4 years.
Yeah, it's frustrating. And the flip side is absolutely true for me, which is, as I've mentioned to you, the reason I don't really end up being able to play in cover bands, or it's not even cover bands, in other people's bands, is because I do want to do my songs.
Right.
So my sort of like my generosity with my time goes only so far.
Yeah. So I think that was another factor. It was just like, I mean, you got Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and George Harrison. Ringo, God bless him, but you have
Great drummer, though.
You have 3 of the most talented songwriters of all time in the same band, and it's just hard. Also, at the time, after Epstein and after other people started to come in to be managers and money people, there was no agreed upon leadership.
Yep.
They needed a strong leader. Paul tried to be that person, but because John had sort of distanced himself, so if Yoko had come along,
right?
I'm not blaming it on Yoko. I'm blaming it on John. I'm blaming the breakup on John, and I think everyone would actually blame it on John.
Yeah.
But if Yoko wasn't around and John was still looking to Paul for that relationship, and Paul stepped forward and said, I am now going to lead us, while still kind of looking up to John, I think the Beatles would have stayed together. Because John would have been, well, I'm still in love with Paul, so I'll let him do that.
Especially if he wasn't so much under the influence of, if he was moving more towards the meditation, less the drugs, all those things.
But even if he was on the drugs, that might have made it even more likely because he'd just be like kind of out of it all the time. But because he was an all or nothing person, it was all Yoko. And when Paul stepped forward and said, I can lead us, and look what he did with Abbey Road.
Right.
John was like, well, I hate that guy because that guy is off my list now. He's in the bad list. And so I think, that's why that happened. Okay. So again, another huge loss of his relationship with Paul, George, and Ringo at this time. So
and by the way, their relationship was quite tense all around. Paul McCartney was telling a story about how when Abbey Road was going to come out, Paul had his first solo album coming out,
right,
and it was coming out like around the same time or something like that. So they sent Ringo to his house with a letter saying, "You can't release your album," and then Paul probably for the first time, or who knows, probably not, but he kicked Ringo the hell out of his house, insulted him, kicked him out.
Right.
Angry Paul that we've never seen, right? Imagine Paul McCartney, you motherfucker, get out of my house. So their whole relationship at that point was a little strained,
Right. I would call it petty. I think that they had been reduced to a situation of pettiness. And
I think there was all that drama with the Apple company, and they lost a lot of money because there were some nefarious involved people that didn't really do them any favors either. And
so this is when the so-called feud happened, and so John wrote "How Do You Sleep" about Paul. Sergeant Pepper took you by surprise. You better see right through that mother's eyes. Those freaks was right when they said you was dead. The one mistake you made was in your head. How do you sleep? How do you sleep at night? You live with straights who tell you was king. Jump when your mama tell you anything. The only thing you've done was yesterday.
Yep.
And since you're gone, You're Just Another Day.
Oh my gosh.
That was because he just released a song called Another Day. A pretty face may last a year or two, but pretty soon they'll see what you can do. The sound you make is music to my ears.
Oh.
You must have learned something in all those years.
Oh my God.
Paul wrote a less scathing song called
Nowhere near.
called Three Legs.
Yeah.
There were actually a number of songs that they wrote back and forth, and George did too. Dog.
Apparently, I didn't know that. That was your first mistake.
Right.
That one apparently was.
That
also
was your lucky break, and throw it away.
Lucky break.
A dog is here, a dog is there. Yeah. My dog, he got 3 legs, but he can't run. So this is basically saying, you know, the 3 left Beatles.
Yeah.
They're a dog with 3 legs and they can't run.
Right.
When I thought you was my friend. When I thought you was my friend. But you let me down, put my heart around the bend. So it's more vulnerable, you know.
Totally. It's him being hurt.
Yeah.
But it fits their personalities in this flipped style. Because now Paul's the one being real.
Right.
And John is being fake. Because that song, it sounds real. Like, oh, I'm telling you how I really feel. That's not how he really felt about Paul.
Well,
he admired the shit out of all the, you know.
True. And because John was borderline, he could become enraged for periods of time and would have those sentiments.
Right. You're right. So they were real sentiments in that they bubbled up. But what I mean is,
it wasn't the gestalt of his feelings.
No, and it felt like if you listen to a song casually, you're like, oh, that's an interesting song. But for me, as a fan, at the time when I really listened to the lyrics, I was like, why are you saying these things?
Yeah, he's such a dick.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because all the documentaries, the best people to ask questions like this are to Paul himself, right? Because John's not around.
Yeah.
So you have to ask Paul, like, so what was it like? And Paul is such a good interviewer that he knows, like, well, if I tell the truth, people are going to hate both of us.
Yeah.
Because it'll make John look really bad.
Yeah.
And I'll be associated with that.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to say is I'm going to kind of gloss over it a little bit.
Minimize it a bit.
Yeah. And we'll all get out of here unscathed. And the fans of the Beatles can still believe in that we are all like these cute little boys, you know. Yeah. At this time, John wrote Cold Turkey, which is about his heroin addiction, 1969. Temperature's rising, fever is high, can't see no future, can't see no sky. My feet are so heavy, so is my head. I wish I was a baby, I wish I was dead. Cold Turkey has got me on the run.
Yeah.
So that was one of his first songs on one of his first solo albums. So again, right there in the lyrics, he's talking about going cold turkey on heroin and going through massive withdrawals. Of course, he would not kick it. He would continually try to quit heroin and not succeed. I suspect, and maybe so I should say that there's probably some John Lennon scholars who are already like writing me all these mistakes that I've written. And, you know, it's fine if you want to say it, but I'm not so excited about the minutia that some people get into.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, John never kicked his habit of heroin, and probably up until the time he died, he was still using. I think he might have had periods of sobriety, and maybe towards the end he had some sobriety, but anyway. So there's a number of years where he was using. Now, that isn't to say that you can't live a functional life while you're using opiates. Yeah. I've had clients who were addicted to heroin, addicted to opiates, Percocet, on methadone, who lived perfectly normal lives.
He wrote some of his best music ever.
Yeah. Well, I would say no, actually. What do you mean? What music?
Like Imagine, Jealous Guy, Woman, Mother.
Well,
you know.
So Woman might have been written when he was getting his head clear a little bit towards the end.
Well, I'm not saying he wrote him while he was high. I'm just saying he didn't like not write anymore, right?
Sure.
Like he was able to still.
But when you compare his songography to Paul's.
Oh no,
and maybe
question,
even George's, actually, it's like the number of like
totally
great hits. Yeah.
What I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though he was the one that wrote a little more from the heart, a little more real, like there was this subset of songs he wrote that were so emotionally bare.
Yeah.
afterwards, and I guess now analyzing some of the things I learned, I look back at some of those earlier songs and I realized, actually, those were emotionally bare lyrically, but not musically.
Right.
But these are both.
So one of the reasons for writing Mother, for example, was that at this point, 1970, he starts doing primal therapy or primal scream therapy with Arthur Janoff.
Mother!
Right. So he and Yoko went to California for 4 months. 4 months. They were doing primal therapy, basically in an inpatient primal therapy, like commune or whatever, institution. For 4 months, he and Yoko are doing primal therapy. Do you know anything about the technique?
Just a little bit. Like you basically try to release your emotions in whatever ways they come out, including screaming and letting it all out. But that's about all I know.
That's pretty much it. And you can even be violent towards, objects or even other people. And the therapy allows for that. So
isn't this not therapy, but like that Rajesh cult Rajneesh,
they did this too. Yeah, it was big. It was a big part of the West Coast.
I'm watching that documentary.
Oh, it's good, right?
Oh my God, it is. Because I heard the beginning of your podcast. And I stopped because I didn't want it ruined. And I'm like, because the way you introduced it, like I started watching it and I couldn't believe, and then they kept surprising me, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah,
I never heard of this.
Yeah, well, it's more weird that I've never heard of it because I was actually living in Washington at the time. But anyway, so yeah, it's a technique where you reenact traumatizing experiences of the past by screaming at the top of your lungs, by beating yourself, by crying uncontrollably. The whole idea is this massive experiential catharsis. And John at this time said that this therapy was something more important to him than the Beatles were. And
that makes sense.
John actually made primal therapy very popular with West Coast and hippies and the Rajneeshis. James Earl Jones became an advocate of it. And Tears for Fears was named after primal therapy.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
John suddenly decided to leave the Institute, and Arthur Janoff would later say, "We were just getting going. We had opened him up, and we didn't have enough time to put him back together again."
Oh.
I remember therapists talking like this in the 90s when I entered the therapeutic field. I remember there was that sentiment was in the air in our profession of just like, you want to open people up, but then you as the clinician have to put them back together again, which I do not hold that metaphor anymore. Lennon would later say, "I still think that Janoff's therapy is great. I just don't know I just know myself better, that's all. I can handle myself better." That Janoff thing, the primal scream and so on, it does affect you because you recognize yourself in there. It was very good for me.
So I had a couple of experiences that were certainly not intentional, both of them under heavy alcohol, unfortunately. One of them was I pulled off. I wasn't driving, luckily, but the person I was driving, I'm like, pull over, and I went up to a tree. This was in the middle of the night. Probably it was like, say, 2 a.m. in the morning. And I started just attacking the tree, breaking branches, just like going insane on the tree. I did this for I don't know how long, and like, so angry. And then I felt terrible, and I started crying and apologizing to the tree for having killed it. And like, it was just like this crazy thing. And I just like, I felt like I had killed someone, like it was, that was one experience. And then another one was, I was coming home from a party and I was in the passenger seat and I was super drunk too. And all of a sudden, I started bawling uncontrollably.
Well,
primarily.
were you encouraging the expression, or was it just coming out of you?
It was just coming out of me.
Right. So that's different. It's not primal therapy is drumming something up.
That's fair. What I'm saying though is like the feeling of primal release, like baby level release.
Yeah.
It actually, in this weird way, felt therapeutic.
Absolutely. If you have the emotion and it wants to come out, then let it come out for sure. That's excellent.
And it would not have come out, unfortunately, again, because I wasn't going through some sort of therapy, it wouldn't have come out naturally. It was like these extreme moments that.
Well, and being drunk, your mechanisms of keeping that kind of stuff are compromised down. So primal therapy certainly can be helpful to some people in that way. It can also be a massive bullshit experience because you take anybody and you do this to them. And, you take someone who's susceptible to the suggestion and you just say, okay, I want you to think about something horrible that happened. And actually, there's a new form of therapy that's kind of popular right now that is similar to this called lifespan integration therapy. And I know people want me to talk about this, and I will at some point. And lifespan integration therapy, it's, from what I gather of it, it sounds like a legit form and sounds great. But in the way that it's taught, I think it has elements of this, in that you take people, again, who are susceptible to this, and you say, I want you to think about something that's traumatic in your life. Well, that naturally makes you uncomfortable, right? And it's going to bring up some emotions. You're going to feel angry. You're going to feel sad, especially if you really put people into that state.
Right.
Then you ask the people to just, express themselves, in some way, some sort of free way. Well, what you end up doing is, being potentially a little hysterical, meaning that you're encouraging false emotions. You're just sort of like screaming, and what that does to the body is it puts it through this experience, nervous system wise, where eventually you're going to come down. And as you come down, you actually feel a sense of euphoria. It's similar to, remember that therapy that you did, that organ therapy, where that guy like squeezed your head?
Yeah.
Remember that? Well, when you do that and then you release the squeezing of your head, you feel euphoric because you no longer have that pain in your head anymore.
Right.
Well, if at that time you have a charismatic leader who says, that is the magic of therapy, then as a susceptible person, you're just like, oh my God, I want to do this all the time.
Right.
But really all you're doing, so like in that Rajneesh episode, what John Atak was talking about, what the Scientologists would do and what the Rajneeshis would do is if you hyperventilate yourself and you jump up and down, you'll have too much oxygen in your blood, it's too acidic or something, and you'll end up kind of being extremely uncomfortable, right? And then you come down from that and you feel euphoric because your body is returning to a state of homeostasis. Plus, your body releases all of this endorphins into your brain because it thinks it's under attack, So you're screaming at the top of your lungs, and your brain starts to try to calm you down. It's going like, ooh, we need endorphins. He's freaking out. You know what I mean? And then afterwards, you're in a state, you're high. You're high on your own juices,
Well, we've all probably experienced at a concert where you really get into it and they play that song you love and you just like singing and everything. And then afterwards you just get... Or
another example, so you're at a concert and you're in the mosh pit or the slam dance pit.
Right.
And it's a stressful, violent environment. Right. And then you walk away from that and you feel euphoric. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a false experience. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but it should be kept in perspective. Having people go through primal therapy or what I might call sort of a simplistic, bastardized lifespan integration therapy or other kinds of Gestalt therapy, experiential therapies like these, everyone just has to understand that these effects are not likely to last.
Yeah.
But if you're susceptible to suggestion, the charismatic leader like Fritz Perls or like Janoff here will say, that is you getting better.
Right.
They'll say, you are now getting better. That euphoric feeling, that is evidence that my therapy that you should continue to pay for is working.
Right.
When it might not be.
I'm so lucky in a way when I found a therapist because it was the complete opposite of this kind of thing. Because the thing is, I can, as you know, I can role play along with something. And so, okay, we're going to get into this. Whoa. But I'm not, like, I don't fall for it, sort of. Like back in high school, I would go to, my friends had these revival churches, and it's the kind where everyone would get really into it. Some of them would start speaking in tongues. Someone would faint, all these kinds of things, right? And I always just kind of like looked around and, I'd clap along and sing, but I'm like, what the hell is wrong with these people, right? But the thing is, when I found my therapist, I've talked about this before, my initial instinct was to dramatize the whole thing, tell my life story and all these things. And she was much more about like, well, let's talk about what's going on right now. How do you feel right now? What's going on? And so it brought me back down to like a grounded, like what is going on in my life? What am I feeling? Instead of what I could have done, which is, oh, I have an audience. Let me play up. I'll scream at the top of you want to hear about my life? Yay!
Right. Yeah. Now, this is not to say that emotional expression and experiential therapy is not helpful. It absolutely can. But the claims of the primal therapy movement were way overblown. And guess what? John Lennon wasn't cured after this. You know what I mean? But it did inspire him to do a lot of things. For example, the therapist perhaps suggests this, but he was like, okay, I'm going to confront my father. My father's still alive. I'm going to confront him. And John invited his father and his father's new family to his home. So imagine this, you're out, and I think John's living in the States at this point. So Alf and his,
one of the richest men in the world.
Yeah. So Alf and his new wife and his kids, they come to the States to meet John Lennon. And a witness reported the following. John seized Freddie, his father Alf, by the lapels and shook him, screaming and howling at him. John told his father if he went to the press with his life story, because I think John was worried his dad was going to publish a life story about John himself, he would lock him in a crate and throw him out of a plane into the ocean to be drowned.
Oh my God.
And Alf, his father, was legitimately afraid that John might actually go through with that.
Yeah.
It was like, it didn't seem like a veiled...
Well, he's screaming. You don't know this person.
He's
your son, but you don't know them.
Right. And John had a vibe of like, I'm serious, man. I'm unglued.
Yeah.
And so Freddie kept a very low profile after that. So again, this is potentially the outgrowth of this kind of primal scream therapy. It's like, oh, I need to be radically honest and like attack people when I feel like I should attack them.
Right.
And John would later regret that. He also wrote Mother out of this experience. Being in primal therapy, screaming at the top of his lungs, inspired him to write one of the best songs he ever wrote.
Yeah.
So just going through the lyrics here, they're heartbreaking. Mother, you had me, but I never had you.
I never had you. Oh my God.
This is such a great line. Mother, you had me, like you gave birth to me, but I never had you. I wanted you, but you didn't want me.
Yeah.
So I just got to tell you goodbye, goodbye. Father, you left me, but I never left you. I needed you, but you didn't need me. So I just got to tell you goodbye, goodbye. Children, don't do what I have done. So this is him saying, I'm also at fault here.
Yeah.
I couldn't walk and I tried to run.
Yeah.
So I just got to tell you goodbye, goodbye. Mama, don't go. Daddy, come home. And he says this over and over again.
Mama, yeah. And then it's like,
Daddy, come home.
I love that rhythm too, because it's so offbeat,
Yeah.
It's Mama, and then Daddy, come home. You know.
Right.
Oh my gosh. So I never knew the significance, but even though I didn't know all the story, I could tell it was real. It was like, wow.
Right.
Like this is
right. I know when you
deep stuff.
When you know the real story of John Lennon, it's like this shit just gives me chills.
Yeah.
Because again, he's such a tragic figure, and I love his music so much. But this song is just so poignant, and I love that kind of songwriting. And I don't consider myself a lyricist very much, but I do try to write kind of like this, where it's extremely overt in this way.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm not as good as John Lennon, but anyway, Ringo played on this track, and this song has been covered by many people, including the Roots. Actually, Google, everyone out there, go on YouTube, watch the Roots version of Mother by
I never
John
knew
Lennon.
that.
It's one of the best.
That's cool.
I like the Roots, but it's the best Roots song I've ever heard. Barbra Streisand sang it, Christina Aguilera, and actually their versions are pretty good too.
I didn't know this was a covered song.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Okay, so now let's get to the 70s. He battles to stay in the United States. Nixon's trying to get him deported. Again, more transference with his father. They were trying to get away from Britain because the British people hated Yoko so much.
Oh, wow.
A lot of activism against the war. Again, I think it was, obviously it was a good idea to be anti-Vietnam War, but I also think it was sort of transferential, given his issues with authority. He and Yoko try to have many children. They tried to have children a lot of times. She had 3 miscarriages. So
wow.
So another massive loss.
Is that because of drugs, maybe?
Well, she was older, right?
Okay.
So she's like, I think when they had Sean, she was like in her 40s.
Oh, okay.
1973, he and Yoko separate. Did you know this?
No.
Oh yeah, they had massive relationship problems. He was physically abusive to her.
Right.
Again, John with his borderline traits. He moved to Los Angeles, and Yoko actually, so they had an assistant, May Pang, I think a Chinese American woman. And Yoko actually said to John, I want you to have an affair with May Pang.
What?
So again, more mother, right? So she basically set up this relationship to some extent.
Okay.
And so he goes to LA with her, and he's seen around town with this new woman, May Pang. And guess what? He was physically abusive to her too.
Oh.
A friend of John's...
So he never actually outgrew that.
No. Well, maybe in the last couple of years of his life. A friend of John's said that John misunderstood something that May Pang said, and John leapt at her and tried to strangle her.
Wow.
So this isn't just hitting.
No, he's a almost murderer.
Right. And the friend said that he had to physically restrain John, or who knows how far John would have taken it.
Man.
Strangled this woman.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, when you have massive attachment disruption and injury and abandonment and damage, you can be easily triggered, and you can become almost a different person. 1974 goes back to Yoko, but Yoko allowed John to continue seeing May Pang as his mistress, because Yoko was actually getting smothered by John, and she was like, I can't do my art anymore because he wants me around all the time. And so Sean is born around this time, and some reports would say at this point he became much more dedicated as a father. Mm-hmm. But there are other reports that his heroin addiction was actually getting worse and he wasn't that great of a father. But anyway, at the very least, we do know that he left the music business entirely. And I actually forgot this, or I didn't notice it. I
didn't know that either.
Yeah, from 1975 until 1980, basically.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't do a single thing in music. He said in the interviews that his guitar was hanging on the wall above his bed, and he for years never even touched his guitar.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
The last 5 years of his life.
Yeah. But then he had Double Fantasy, which came out just before he died, actually, right? Now, some people would say that he left the music business because of Sean, because he's like, I want to dedicate myself to being a father. I'm a feminist, so I'm going to stay home.
Could have been heroin.
But it also could have been heroin, right? John Lennon said that, quote, Sean was a planned child, and therein lies the difference from Julian.
Yeah.
I don't love Julian any less as a child. He's still my son. Whenever he came, whether he came from a bottle of whiskey or because they didn't have pills in those days, he's here. He belongs to me. And
oh
he
my
always will.
God! What a horrible thing to say.
Right. He's basically saying Julian came from a bottle of whiskey, and because they didn't have any pills back then.
But don't worry about it. It doesn't make you any less of my son.
Right.
Can you imagine that's a shocking lack of self-awareness,
Yeah. But honest, right? I mean, honest.
But honest in a way that assumes like no one's listening.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, dude, people are listening,
and maybe
including Julian.
Right. 1976, in his final years, his father wrote a manuscript about his life story. So Alf did write that manuscript.
Okay.
And he bequeathed it to John. So he's like, I'm not going to publish it, but so this is Alf saying, I'm about
Don't throw me from an airplane.
Well, what he's about to die. He's getting old, and he's just like, I want John to understand the real story.
I see.
And that it was like not all his fault that,
Right.
you know, and so Alf was dying of stomach cancer, and someone called John to let him know. And John was like, okay, fine. So he called his father on his deathbed, and John actually apologized to his father for his past behavior. Wow. And John said in an interview about his father, I came out of therapy and told him to get the hell out. And he did get the hell out. And I wish I hadn't really, because everyone has their problems, including wayward fathers.
Yeah.
I'm a bit older now, and I understand the pressure of having children or divorces and reasons why people can't cope with their responsibility. So he's getting older. Now he's in his, later 30s, and he's like beginning to mature, Again, during this time, he's still struggling with heroin, and Yoko was too, by the way. This is depicted in the movie Two of Us. Came out in the year 2000. I like this movie, and Humberto isn't a good enough fan to have watched it.
But what Two of Us is more about Yoko and John.
No, Two of Us is about John and Paul.
I was just guessing because you just said that this was depicted in that movie.
No.
Okay.
The entire movie is Paul and John hanging. It's like one evening of them hanging out, and it's kind of a famous evening.
Oh, but it's after the Beatles already broke up.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't want to watch it.
Yeah. Actually, it's a famous night because at one point they're hanging out in John's New York apartment.
Yeah.
And they're just laughing and goofing around, and they're watching David Letterman.
Oh.
Or the Tonight Show.
Johnny Carson, probably.
Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
One of them. And they were this close to just, because it was right down the street where they filmed, well, no, Johnny Carson was in Burbank.
Oh.
So I think it was Letterman.
Was he on that long ago?
God, I don't think so.
This would have been, what, 79? No, that can't be.
Well,
but anyways, they were watching something.
Some live show. Some live talk show.
And they almost went there.
And they almost drove down there and did a performance, an impromptu performance.
Oh my God.
But John kind of got tired. He's like, never mind. So imagine if that had happened, how that would have changed the narrative.
Wow.
Because it's like, wait, so they're still friends? And they're hanging out, and they just sort of popped by and performed.
And did a performance.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so skipping forward to 1980, age 40. It's the end of the year. He, just a few weeks after Double Fantasy was released, he was at the beginning of a total comeback now.
Right.
In a way, you could say it had been since 1967 since he had really been a strong songwriter. This album has Woman.
Yeah.
One of the best songs he ever wrote.
Yeah.
Just Like Starting Over.
Oh,
Great
my
song.
God.
Beautiful Boy.
Oh, my
Great
God.
song. Watching the Wheels. Nobody told me there'll be days like these.
So good. So, like, awesome. Like,
Right.
He's come around back into himself.
And this is an album where every other song is a song by Yoko. So, like, four of the 5 John songs are classics.
Yeah.
It's like, because all those fucking albums that John would have, every other song was by Yoko. And it's like, so it limited the amount of John material that could be on these albums. But anyway.
That's true. So that if the album had just John songs, it's just hit after hit.
December 8, 1980, Lita's birthday, by the way. Oh. A man who will go unnamed because I don't want to glorify.
Terrible.
Shot John a bunch of times in the back, killed him as he was coming home from recording, I think. And the guy who killed him is still in prison. And from what I can tell, he was on the spectrum between bipolar and schizophrenia. He's very emotional and very angry at the world, and he was obsessed with the Beatles. He wanted to be a Beatle.
Oh, my God.
Then he was influenced by Christianity and hated... So at first he loved John Lennon and loved the Beatles, and then he became a born-again Christian of some kind, and then he was like, wait... John thought he was better than Jesus, and he has the Imagine song. And so then he became very angry at John Lennon, and his symptoms were getting worse, and he started planning on killing several celebrities. But John had, because he was the working class hero, he hated fame, and so he wanted to just be a normal person in Manhattan, and he prided himself on being able to walk around Manhattan without having to, disguise himself at all. He just wanted people to get used to him. So he was extremely accessible, and the guy who killed him knew that because he had actually met John, before actually killing him. So lots of people want to know, like, why would this guy kill John Lennon? And as with all these cases, I get asked these questions a lot because I have a podcast and people ask me, why did this happen? Why did that happen? I've studied it so much now, and the best answer I can say is it's a complete mystery. There are so many people who fit this profile. Do you know how many schizophrenic people there are in the world? Do you know how many bipolar people there are in the world? Do you know how many angry Christians there are in the world?
Right.
There are so many, and obsessive fans. There are so many. What makes the difference between those millions of people and that one person who decides to take that action? I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that he was untreated in his issues, and if we had more money for mental health dollars, then maybe this might not have happened.
I mean, he could have been a school shooter.
Yeah, today, in all likelihood, that's what he would have been, or some kind of other mass killer. Do you remember when this happened, when John Lennon died?
I loosely, I was 5.
Yeah.
So I loosely remember it being a big thing.
I absolutely remember it. I just turned 10 years old, and John Lennon's songs were, because the Double Fantasy album was a big smash. I think Mother might have been the first hit. I'm not quite sure, but probably not, actually. Anyway, the point is that by the age of 10, again, in my world, the Beatles was a big thing, and even post-Beatles, John, Paul, George, Ringo songs. And to have a pop star die, it was such a big deal. I also remember when Elvis died, just because Elvis had died just a few years before that. But I really remember when John died, and I even remember where I was when I found out. I was in the car driving, passenger seat. My mom's driving, and I think we were going to the mall. And it was actually probably for Christmas shopping, because this is December 8, right? And I remember hearing about it on the radio, and, my mom was just like, because my parents weren't big Beatles fans, but they certainly would be shocked by such a thing. And I remember, I think all day, every radio station, all they played was John Lennon songs.
Of course.
And so it was this big kind of event.
Which is sort of what I remember, because I didn't really have the context of who are the Beatles or anything. But I remember, this famous musician died. And I remember hearing Imagine on the radio. Related to him being killed or something. And that was the first time I remember, other than ABBA and the Carpenters, I hadn't yet had other music that left such an impact. When I heard Imagine, I was like, whoa,
Wow. Okay. So that brings us to the end of his life. Again, let's look at all of his abandonments and losses. Abandoned by dad, left at home alone by mom multiple times. Mom abandoned him and had another family. Early in life, he's put with his uncle because his mom was in a maternity home. Dad moves away, has another family. His uncle dies. His mom dies tragically. His best friend dies tragically. He finds out he has a sister, can't find her. His father figure, Brian, dies tragically. He loses his best friend, Paul. At times, he actually loses Yoko, too. So all this abandonment and pain, and he's just in a constant state of that borderline pain. So let me review, the overall conceptualization here. Again, I can't diagnose from afar. God knows what the reality of his personality was. But before doing this deep dive, I would have said, well, I don't know. John probably didn't have any disorder. I can't really think of anything that he would have had. He's just a songwriter, nice guy. Yeah, he had some rough edges, but what's the big deal?
Who doesn't?
But looking deeper at the darker side of John Lennon's life that he admitted to, and I didn't go over this, but in later interviews, in the late 70s, he would talk openly about the fact that he would beat Cynthia, and he was a terrible father to Julian, and he was, it was rough. So I would conceptualize him as being a mild borderline, sort of a mild to moderate borderline with a dash of narcissism.
Yeah.
Not the super destructive type like Charles Manson or something, but the normal type, the type I see in my therapy office. And here are my 7 points of evidence. Number one, from the age of 5, he saw himself as a genius. So this is part of his narcissism. When he was young, he saw himself. He had this sort of grandiose, defensive grandiosity. When the Beatles started out, before they had any kind of fame or fortune, he was like, "Where are we going, boys?
To the toppermost of the poppermost, Johnny."
Right. So he, similar to you and me.
Yeah.
You need a dash of narcissism to get you up in the morning,
Right.
To even try to achieve some kind of fame.
Right.
And he, so that's why he was just an asterisk narcissist.
Right.
Because he certainly didn't present the classic signs of narcissistic personality throughout his life. It was much more characterized as borderline. Number 2.
Like you'd have to say something like, people like me who have a very superior intellect don't believe conclusions from all the scientists in the world.
And he would never have let Paul get any of the limelight.
Right.
You know what I mean? And Paul got equal amount of limelight as John did.
Totally.
Number 2, John was paranoid about women leaving him and cheating on him. This is a classic borderline and narcissistic thing. Run for your life, jealous guy.
Like extremely.
Yeah. Beat his partners, and he had to use substances to escape his paranoia. And not paranoia in the sense of schizophrenia, but paranoia in the sense of borderline paranoia.
Was Anna a cover or was that his?
That's a cover.
It is a cover? Okay, because it's funny. It's like, that's such an early song about, but he must have chosen it on purpose, right? Like, it's not a violent song. It's the opposite. It's like what he probably wanted to be like.
Right. Written and directed by Arthur Alexander. Number 3, he changed his look very often. Of all the Beatles, he has the most disparate looks throughout the years. Early John, 67 John, 70 John, 75 John, 80 John,
Right.
like very different. And again, potentially a lack of self, or maybe he's just really into fashion. I don't know. That was sort of a weak one. Number 7, he joked around a lot from childhood to mask his pain. He was the most jokey of all the Beatles in sometimes inappropriate times.
Right.
And that, it's to manage his anxiety about
The rest of you, the rest of you just rattle your jewelry.
right. So obviously it was a pro.
I mean, he did that to like the royal audience, you know?
Or to the Queen, wasn't the
To
Queen?
the Queen, yeah.
Number 5, he reenacted his traumas. He abandoned Cynthia. He abandoned Julian. He abandoned Paul. Just dropped them. Just like, I'm done with you. Forget my wife, forget my son.
It's over.
He made people feel abandoned. Number 6, he had all good, all bad relationships with his mom, Stuart, Paul, Yoko, and other people. And number 7, and this is really the clincher for me, because it's one thing to have all good, all bad relationships, but throughout his life, he had evidence, and he reported he had ongoing psychic pain, and he wrote music about this. Yeah. He was clearly struggling with the classic borderline and narcissistic pain that they feel. People with this trauma injury, it's not just like, occasionally being triggered. It's like, to what degree are they being triggered on a minute-by-minute basis? When they're severely triggered, that's when you'll see them reacting quite badly. But if you just ask them at any moment how they feel about themselves, they'll say, I feel like shit.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of people with borderline will say they feel empty on the inside, they feel worthless, or lacking worth of any sort. That's why they resort to cutting a lot of the time. They'll be sort of chronically suicidal because they're in a constant state of psychic pain. They just feel terrible. And he was searching for answers in alcohol, in music, in Paul, in Yoko, and Stuart, in LSD, and pot. Heroin was a big one, which actually probably did work to some extent, but has its downside, obviously. He slept a lot. He tried to meditate. He did primal scream therapy. He did all these kinds of things. And, it didn't really work. Maybe it got him through the years. The tragedy, as you said, it's like, where would John have been in his 40s?
Right.
He had just released his best solo album of all time.
Yeah.
And for like Mother is a great song, but I'm not going to pop in that song
Right.
just to listen. You know, it's a song you sit down and sort of like endure with him.
Yeah.
But like Woman, that's a song you just put on any circumstance. Great tune. And so what music would have John done
Created,
in the 80s? Where would he have gone maturity-wise? Like on the trajectory he was on a trajectory to be the most mature, most self-aware Beatle of all four of them.
Yeah. It took Paul till this last tour. I finally saw him like round a corner of like, oh, it's not just about me, you know? and so you're right. Like John would have done some amazing work in the 80s.
Right. So it's interesting to think about, you know, or he could have, you know, gone down further, you know, who knows what would have really happened. But it's a tragedy, and his life was tough. And I can't believe I've been a massive Beatles fan for this long, and I haven't really ever understood John Lennon.
Yeah.
What have you learned today, bro?
Well, so you like to think of people like John Lennon in a, wow, what a charmed life. You know, imagine being John Lennon. Like, you just like king of the world. You have all these hits. You're like the massive rock star, all these trips around the world, adoring fans, screaming so loud you can barely play your music. But then you listen to this and you're like, wow, that guy lived in pain from the moment he was born till the moment he died. And a pain that is hard to relate to some extent. And granted, it influenced his music, but it also, like, it pulled him down way more than it brought him up. And so when you look at that, you're like, yeah, that's not something you would easily want to trade for. That amount of pain, of constant anguish, of constant self-loathing, so it's hard. And so it also grows your empathy for not only him, but folks that might be suffering like that. And it also brings a new light on, wow, you know, we idolize him, but he was really abusive, and he had things that we would demonize, you know?
Yeah, it's hard to reconcile. I mean, on some level, there were times when I was doing this deep dive when I was like, so do I have to hate John Lennon now?
Yeah.
In the end, I think I just understand him better. And Yoko has continued to speak well of John. It's not like when he died, she's like, oh, good riddance to that asshole. Yep. So he must have had redeeming qualities, you know? Yeah. So
it's like there's got to be some line between, on the one extreme, you have Hitler. Like, I can't like anything about the guy, right? And on the other extreme, you have someone that's never done anything wrong, and so you have nothing. But there's a lot of grays in the middle. Yeah. And I think John's got to land on the gray zone.
Well, and to me, which is actually the way I see the vast majority of DV perpetrators, and drug addicts for that matter, is they are only doing that because of the deep suffering that they're going through. Mm-hmm. DV perpetrators, on the whole, don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to control the shit out of my spouse.
Right.
And I'm going to beat them and intimidate them. They wake up in the morning and they're just like, I hope someone loves me.
Yeah.
And then they get triggered and they freak out.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I thought we'd end with me listing my favorite John Lennon songs of all time and you singing a line from each one.
Okay.
Please, please me.
Please, please me, oh yeah, like I please you.
Do you want to know a secret?
Listen to do you want to know a secret?
There's a place.
There is a place.
Hard Day's Night.
It's been a hard day's night.
I should have known better.
I should have known better with a girl like you.
That's a great one, right?
Yeah, it's so good.
If I fell
in love with you, would you promise to be true and help me understand that I've been in love? I'll do the part. And I found that love was more than just holding hands.
If I give my heart to you, I must be sure from the very start. Yeah, that's okay. We probably need an accompaniment. But anyway.
Well, because I always sing the Paul part. So I don't
Oh, you
really-
do?
Yeah.
I thought we've sang that before, and you sang the
I
John
might have,
part.
but I always sing the Paul part.
I don't want to spoil the party. I don't want to spoil the party, so I'll go.
So I'll go.
Help.
Help! I need somebody. Help!
You've got to hide your love away.
Hey, you got to hide your love away.
You're going to lose that girl.
You're gonna lose that. Yes, you're gonna lose that. You're gonna lose that girl.
Ticket to Ride.
By the way, that's another, that that girl
Yeah.
is another.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Ticket to Ride.
I think I'm gonna be sad. I think it's today. Yeah.
Norwegian Wood.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, this is the one of the ones that we sang
Yeah.
because it's on
Isn't
Soul.
it good? Norwegian Wood. Oh.
Nowhere Man.
He's a real nowhere man.
Girl.
Girl.
Girl. Yeah. I'm only sleeping.
I'm only sleeping.
She said.
Didn't. How does that one go?
She said.
She said, I know what it's like to be dead.
Day Tripper.
Day tripper, yeah.
A Hard Day's Night.
No, we already did that one.
What
Did we do Help?
Oh, I think I double counted.
Help!
I Am the Walrus.
I am the Eggman. I am the Eggman. I am the walrus.
You are the Eggman.
Cuckoo, cuckoo.
Strawberry Fields.
But no, I am the Eggman because the walrus was Paul.
But I think he says I am the
No,
Eggman.
in the song he does, but later it comes out that the walrus was Paul.
Yeah.
So I'm fixing the lyrics for him.
Oh, I get it. Strawberry Fields.
There are places. Strawberry fields forever.
Sexy Sadie.
Sexy Sadie, you broke the rules.
Come Together.
Come together right now. I always thought that song was about an orgy. Over me.
You know what it's about?
The war, isn't it? Like,
Well, on Wikipedia, which God knows, it said that it's about he was writing the song because Timothy Leary was gonna run against Ronald Reagan for California governor in 1970.
here come all flat top, and that's you come all groovy arms like
Maybe,
that.
yeah. And so
Oh.
Come Together is like a campaign song for Timothy Leary. Come Together meaning like, come on, everyone, let's come together.
Oh, interesting.
I could be wrong about that. But that really changes the whole.
Yeah, that changes
Plus
a lot.
Timothy Leary for governor. And then Timothy Leary got arrested on pot possession and went to prison, so he couldn't run for governor anymore. Across the Universe.
Words are flowing out like endless rain
into a paper cup. Yeah, so those are just some of my favorite Lennon
You didn't
songs.
have In My Life, though.
I like that song, but
Okay.
again, it's not one that I would put in my top,
Okay.
30 or so.
What about LSD?
That's a good song.
Picture yourself in the boat
But again,
on the river.
I'm not gonna pop that one in. Like,
Tangerine tree.
do you want to know a secret? There's a place.
Yeah, those are
no.
those are
I
so
forgot. No Reply.
good. We said our goodbyes. No, wait. How does No Reply go?
God. Well, let's.
No
move on.
reply.
Oh yeah. Yes, that's it.
I just.
Essentially,
How does it start?
I'm a loser.
I'm a loser, and I'm not how I appear to be.
So again, another song that kind of reveals his inner working.
Did we do 8 days a week? Oh, that was not in your.
Apparently, according to the internet, McCartney mainly wrote that
Oh,
song.
did he? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Lennon had a piece of it, but this website, the Beatles Bible, whatever, it was like mainly McCartney, 8 days a week. Yeah. So let us know what you think. Again, if you're one of the pedantic folks, if we got a couple things wrong, I don't want to hear about it. If we got a massive thing wrong, let me know, because I'm always interested in learning. But also let me know what you think about this sort of thing. I'm guessing you must be a John Lennon fan at some level to be listening to this. And I'm guessing if you're anything like me, it's like, ooh, this is new information. You know, I didn't know this stuff. This is interesting. Tell us how your reaction is to it. It does it for that episode. Please take care of yourself, because
you deserve it. It's like Bob Dylan meets something else.